then we move on. So that's just where I'm at. Thanks, Vice Mayor.
Thank you so much. And Madam Mayor, thank you. Appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we clarify as well. In this meeting, I think we will be going by the 3-minute time rule. So our time is very valuable and we need to move on. So we're going to be doing the 3 minutes. And we'll go 2 rounds for sure. I'm sure that people will have questions, but we have to keep that to the 3 minutes. And then if we choose to have another round, then it'll be a vote again. And otherwise, that's the rules. And we have to stick to that. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. Okay, so we've gotten through that conversation. Did you want to go ahead and continue, Ms. Van Buren? Or are we moving on?
Yes, thank you. I would just ask that the Madam Clerk, if she could move us through the departments and introduce those as they come on.
Okay, so we'll do that. Madam Clerk?
All right, at this time, we will move over Fire Chief Dave Cochran to be able to give the presentation for the fire department. And as was noted earlier, each of the departments do have their own slides. If there are any issues on their end, we will be able to manage it on ours. But we do ask that staff share their screen. They should have the ability to do so. And if there's any other issues, just let us know.
Welcome, Chief Cochran.
Thank you, Fire Chief Dave Cochran, for the record. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, and council members. I will be sharing my screen now. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me expand it. There we go. All right. So get right into it. This is the org chart for the fire department. You see at the top there, we have 266 funded positions. That covers everything from emergency operations to fleet management, includes our fire prevention bureau, safety and training, and our emergency medical services staff. These are our departmental core services. We've broken them down into 6 major areas, really all interrelated because we need every one of these to function and be operational and funded, if we're talking about in the budget context that we're talking about today, to deliver the service that we deliver. The emergency medical services, of course, is the majority of our calls. About 2/3 of our calls are emergency medical service calls. Emergency operations is kind of the overarching umbrella for everything we do. Fire prevention, of course, is vital not only to the fire department, but to the community as well. I don't want to understate that, because a big chunk of what they do is out there doing inspections so that businesses can get open, buildings can get built, those kind of things that keep the economy moving. Fleet maintenance, of course, is our shop. We have a specialized fire shop because we have unique needs for the fire apparatus in particular, our engines and our trucks. That's why we have a separate mechanic operation apart from the city. Program and service management, of course, is like any department. We need administration. We need all the people behind the scenes, and sometimes not behind the scenes, to keep the motors running. And then, of course, safety and training. Safety, always our #1 job. And much of what we do, probably the majority of what we do in terms of service delivery, requires us to keep up on our continuing education, our hands-on training, our certifications, all the things we need to have in place so that we can deliver the service to the citizens and visitors of Reno. Here's what our top accomplishments look like for 2021. We had literally a historic fire season. I think, as all of you are aware, over 10 million acres burned, over 4 million acres in California alone. That was a record for California. They had the first, third, and fifth largest fires they've ever had in the history of California, all last year. So we spent a lot of time in California with our resources helping them out. And you've heard me say it before, that's key to the fire service. No one department, even a county, a state, a country, can expect to staff up and have the resources available to mitigate that epic, that historic level incident. And that's why we go to help, because when we need help, for example, the Pine Haven fire, they come and help us. And that's how the system works, and it works well. We increased our paramedic staffing from 8 companies to 10. And again, going back to the wildland fires, responded to 59 different fires throughout the western states. The majority of those and the majority of the time spent was in California, but we were spread across the western states in those responses. As far as our major initiatives and strategies, increased staffing is number one. And you've heard me say before, the priorities here are people, equipment, and stations. And I think you'll see that our major initiatives reflect that. Our call volume continues to go up. I will add the caveat, last year, 2020, it did go down a few hundred calls, and a few hundred may sound like a lot, or maybe it sounds like a little. If put it in context, when we have over 42,000 calls, a few hundred calls is just a blip. And that's in a situation where, in theory, the community was shut down. We weren't out driving or doing things that would generate 911 calls, and our call volume still stayed that high. So there's a great concern that we're going to boomerang back, and the call volume is going to leap astronomically this year. We're seeing a little bit of an increase right now, and we'll see as things open up if that continues to trend upward. The next initiative, we want to expand and develop our emergency management efforts. This pandemic was definitely a learning opportunity. I think the fire department and the city as a whole did remarkable work in terms of managing this. This was, we were flying the plane as we were building it. There was no blueprint for this, and we had to figure it out as we went along. And credit to my staff and the entire fire department, and like I said, the city. I think it was really a joint effort that got us through this. And I know we're not out of it. Hopefully that light at the end of the tunnel is a positive sign, because I think we're getting there. But we are going to take this as a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, and make sure that as best we can, the next unexpected emergency, we're prepared to handle it. And then the third one, again, I mentioned the priorities. People, apparatus. We have an apparatus replacement program in place, so that's why you don't see that on the major initiatives right here. And stations. We want to continue to develop and research funding strategies, grant opportunities, whatever it takes to not only add stations where they're needed. We project needs in the north, south, east, and west, literally. But we also have 2 stations, Station 1, which is our downtown station, and Station 21, which is the GSR, which are essentially tents. They have a 10-year lifespan. They're going on about 13 years now. So we need to replace those and install permanent stations, either in those locations or some other strategic location within those districts. Here's what our budget history looks like, including the proposed budget for 2022. I would point out that a little under $50 million of our $52 million budget is basically wages and benefits. You're talking a little bit north of 94% of our budget is wages and benefits. And I point that out because there's not a lot of flexibility there. Those costs are what they are. We don't have any wiggle room in there. They're negotiated. They're part of the collective bargaining agreements that the majority of our personnel operate under. So again, a little bit, almost 95% of our budget is in a sense fixed. Oops, hold on. And then going into our additional funding requests, in the interest of being efficient and not giving Vicki cause to jump in and move us along, I'm just going to highlight a couple of these. Number one priority, again, it sounds like a broken record, but it's important. Firefighters, 20
David,
firefighters.
I'm sorry. Can you enlarge this a little bit? Can you? It's just a little hard to read.
Let me see. That may be beyond my skill set. But
I'm sorry.
I can do.
I think it's it might be in the slideshow thing, or just control. There you go. Or just you can control roll down, back down a little bit. Just and I've moved my.
Does that help, Councilwoman?
That's too big. That's too big. But if you could bring it back down just a skosh, that'd be great. I don't know how you did it, so
Yeah.
It's in our
there you
book.
go. Okay, wherever you end up.
It's in our
Oops.
books. We have the pages in our books.
Oh, in our book. Okay, you're right. I apologize. Forget it. I have the book. I will look it up at the book instead.
It isn't the last page of the fire section.
I'm sorry. I'll just look in my book, David. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Let me get back to that screen.
But the public may like to see that, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I was mentioning the firefighters. 20 firefighters is our #1 priority. That matches the request that we made under the SAFER grant, which you approved at the last meeting. Thank you again for that. We did get that grant application submitted. We've already got one letter of support from Assemblyman Amade, and we're looking for support from Senators Rosen and Cortez Masto as well. And we are confident we will get that support. And I think I mentioned at the meeting, but at the risk of being redundant, we expect to hear back on whether we were successful in that grant in June, maybe July. The #2 request there I want to highlight, because I know some of you have heard this. I know Councilwoman Weber was speaking to her the other day. The EMS coordinator position there, that is Kim Eastman. That is the person who's been doing exemplary work in terms of managing all things COVID for not just the fire department, but for the city. She's been outstanding. The one thing I would point out, at the direction of finance, I think it's the best practices in terms of budgeting. We put in the total cost for that position. We have secured grant funding for 6 months of the year. So the ultimate funding, and we will continue to pursue other grant funding to see if we can keep that going. But at the end of the day, the request will be for the last 6 months of the fiscal year that we're talking about. So again, we have grant funding to take us through the end of this calendar year, but that's only half of the fiscal year.
Right.
And then the third one I'll highlight is right below that, Fire Systems Analyst. This is essentially not 100% dedicated, but a dedicated public safety data person. You see no dollar amounts there because the position will live in IT. But as we all know, data is king, and we need to make data-driven decisions. We've worked very hard to do that, and I think we're doing a very good job of it. But what we're doing it with is a little bit of a piecemeal approach on overtime through various members of the department. And what we've proposed, communicated to city manager and to finance, is that by consolidating those overtime costs, we can essentially come out to a zero-sum position. We'll move those to the funding, to IT, to fund an additional data person. Again, that would be dedicated to public safety. So that's why you're not seeing any dollar amounts there. I won't go through the rest of them, but I believe that is the end of the slides. Yes, and I'm happy to answer questions about anything that I've shared with you or any other questions you may have. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well.
Thank you. I'm sure they'll be asking to have it put back up. Councilwoman Breckus, did you go first?
Sure. I just want to confirm the two PowerPoints in front, which were general kind of macro on the budget. We're not going to have a chance to ask our questions on those. That's what we lost yesterday. Is that correct?
You'll have an opportunity, but that is what you lost yesterday, yes.
Okay.
That's been moved to the end. So if we don't
that's
do in the first 2 days, we will do that after your strategy session. We will go into all that and present.
So the question, so the back page of the FTE counts of 23, these are the additional funding requests outside of the manager's budget recommendations, correct?
So in that first part where it had some strategic investments, those are the recommendations.
Okay.
But we haven't gone through. What you're seeing within each department is everything they requested, and what you see in that piece of the presentation are the strategic investments that the city manager felt would move the organization forward next year.
Okay, that's a different terminology than we've used before of strategic investments, because investments have usually meant hard and not operational, which is staffing. So that was one of my questions I was going to ask. Let me pull that out of my binder and then I'll follow up. And thank you, Chief.
Thank you. So, Councilwoman Dewar?
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that. So I'm going to ask this as a general request to everyone. It would be really helpful, given that we're hearing what the department requested, for example, the 23. But then we're also know that there's a different number that was recommended by either Debbie and the city manager, whoever. It would be really, really good to end your presentation, including you, Chief, and I'm going to ask you first, with what is recommended for your department by the city manager. So we have the compare and contrast together, because I don't want to come back to this like either 2 days from now or like 2 weeks from now and having to do that. If you could just summarize for us, you requested 23 positions and various equipment, and then what is recommended? And we can flip back and forth, but just could you answer that question?
I think if I understood the question correctly, you were asking what city manager is recommending from our budget request.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So should we go to the city manager or?
Fine. However you want to do it, but I just want them together.
And I think that's a very good point.
And if I won't speak for the city manager, but my recollection is that he is recommending the data position, the third one that I mentioned, that is cost neutral. And I know he understands the importance of Kim Easton's position. I'm not sure if it rises to the level of a recommendation, but I know he supports that position.
Can I ask, when you said, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, were you finished, Councilwoman
Yes.
Dewar?
I just wanted to get my answer though. I don't want to forget about that part. Okay. Say whatever you want.
If I may, there were no city manager recommendations specific to the fire department.
Okay.
So they're saying they could use 23 people. And when you say no recommendations, you're recommending 0.
Well, there is a pending SAFER grant, which would provide those positions. So that
And
is.
how many would that provide?
I would
20.
bet
20 of them.
That's what was authorized by council for them to put in their grant application. And
Okay.
we're waiting to see what happens with that grant application. And if that does come through, there would be added to the budget, but that won't happen until after July 1st. So we have to do it as an augmentation to add
Okay.
the positions after that.
So this is super helpful. So just to let me wrap up, make sure I understand. These positions would have come out of the general fund the way it was proposed. Instead, we applied for a grant a few weeks ago or months ago. We won't know about it till after July. So if in July we don't get it and there is nothing in our city budget for fire, whether either personnel, but later in CIP, I thought I saw equipment. So that's a little confusing, but we can cover that later. But is that the sum and substance of it? And we might have to revisit it if we don't get the grant.
The sum and substance of it is that the fire department, the city of Reno are competing for a SAFER grant that would allow us to hire up to 20 firefighters. That is 20 of the 23 that the chief mentioned in his overview. There are a number of capital projects that we're looking at for the fire department. There are a number of equipment purchases that we're looking for the fire department. You'll recall that the chief said that the reason that those aren't included necessarily in the major initiatives is because those are ongoing and rolling programs that have been set up by both the fire department and the finance department. And so they are sort of ongoing operational things. I think too, what the chief mentioned, and one that I would choose to highlight, is the position that will analyze data for us. And you'll see that in the IT presentation. If you'll recall that.
So it's not in the fire department, it's in IT.
The funding for it would be in IT. That's where the
And last
position.
thing, you said 23, but only on my chart, I only see 21. Oh, here's 23. So
Councilwoman Dewar, well, let's come back to you because I
that's
think you
fine.
have questions. We'll go.
No problem. Okay.
Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. And my question might be more suited to what Councilwoman Breckus brought up initially, and it might be more of a macro level. At what point are we or will we be getting the audit results in concert and collaboration with these budget asks, or is that audit information from all departments? I mean, we spend resources sometimes rather substantial to do these audits. I just need to hear how those audits and what comes out of them marry up with this budget process. At what point do we have that discussion, or is that a staff discussion that has already been had? Maybe that's to City Manager Thornley.
Let me see if I understand your question. Are you asking the CPSM audit that was done with the fire department, how these recommendations match up with the results of that audit?
I'm asking how, maybe this is again more macro, maybe this is any audit. Let's say any audit of any department in any way, components of those audits in some form or fashion, in some way, have a connection to our budget, right? How are those audits, how are those audits working into these budget requests or recommendations? And how do we understand as council how those things have been vetted out, discussed, lined up, so we understand that the audit information is not in conflict or in opposition to what the budget augmentations are.
Okay. So I think that the answer in general to a very broad question is that the audits and the results of the audits inform the requests and recommendations from the various department heads. They inform the conversations we have as we build this packet out. If what you would like is a detailed breakdown of audits, their results, and places where it's been plugged into the budget or these recommendations, we can certainly provide that, but we're not in a position to do that today.
And that's fine. And I understood that. I would like that at some point. Like I said, we expend a lot of resources with professionals that come in to do these audits. I'm just trying to understand the results of those on any department. I don't mean to be picking on fire. They just happen to be the first one up. How that, sorry, Chief, how that lines up with our budgeting process. That's what I would like to know. Thank you.
And I think that would be great for every one of these presentations, as you mentioned. So I think we all agree on that. I'm going to ask a quick question, and then I'm going to go back to you, Councilwoman Breckus. So my quick question is off of the additional funding request, and you talked about the 20 SAFER grant employees, and then you talked about, is number 2 on your priority list, the EMS coordinator? Is that the Commisman position that you're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Chief Cochran. I'm sorry about that. And then you had like 3 requests. You had the SAFER grant, which is the number 1, number 2, and then what was the third? You had 3 that.
So it was number 3, what's being identified as a senior systems analyst, and that is the position that the city manager mentioned that the funding will live in IT. We're highlighting it here because it will have a public safety slant in terms of duties of that person, but the funding and the position will actually live in IT. So you're going to see it again when IT presents.
Okay, perfect. That was my questions. I couldn't figure that all out. So thank you.
No problem.
Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, thank you. All of my questions, well, actually, while we have Chief here, what is the IT person going to do? Data people usually don't live in IT, so I'm trying to understand, is it a GIS person or?
So we have a number of different programs, and I said data, and a lot of them, we draw data from the programs, but for example, Telestaff, that's our staffing program. RPD is the same thing. We manage our staffing through that. That feeds into payroll. And that is a system that is very complex and requires attention. And fortunately, we have some skilled people who have been able to manage it for us, but that would be one of the duties. Another one is our reporting system. Every call we go on, those 42,000 calls, we need to fill out a report. It may include an EMS report. It may include a fire report. There's always the general information. That whole reporting system is in constant need of attention to make sure that it's managed properly. Our EPCR system is a part of that. That's our EMS reporting system. The new inventory system that we have implemented for logistics and our supply services, known as OpIQ. That's another system that it's not fully implemented yet. So those are 3 examples of systems that I'll call them the IT person. So it won't necessarily be data, but we do draw data from each of those systems, whether it's data to generate payroll, data to generate call volumes, the type of calls, or even data to generate our inventory management needs, if you will, so that we can be more efficient in how we manage our inventory. What we're working toward is a system where, almost a just-in-time ordering system, where we're not stockpiling.
Cut you off because we're being tight on time here,
Sure,
and
sure.
That's interesting. I mean, I hear HR needs, and I hear what I think our in-department management analyst leads. So I'll look at that. Ms. Lochner, do we have people currently on a SAFER grant? I thought we applied for one this past year. How many people do we have on SAFER grants right now?
It's, I believe, 8.
Okay.
8, correct.
And they have 1 more year.
And then we have to absorb them.
Yes, but we're on track to do that.
Okay.
That was under the old program.
Okay, and then the replacement program that the council did the medium-term bond on, is that over in the capital or is that reflected in this department budget?
That's in capital.
Okay, okay. You've changed things up. You know, I don't object to it. It's just that, you know, it's different eyes for me that, you know, who's been under what other budget approaches. And then I guess I'll leave my thoughts on the fire department need, because I see a very robust facilities proposal from our manager. And again, I don't see fire mentioned in there, and want to understand why that's not rising up to the level, but thank you.
Are you finished? And would you like a couple more, a couple minutes? My egg timer didn't turn over correctly. And your first round was not very long. So if you want another minute or two.
I think I'm good, because I just want to understand where other pieces of departments come up in different segments of this discussion. So I think I understand it.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we're just stumbling around a little bit with them being our first department, just trying to understand the layout. It's just a new layout. It's fine. It's great. It's just, we have to work through it at least once to get it. So to that point, and following up really on Vice Mayor Weber's points, when you, on the item 3, fire systems analyst IT. So I still don't think I got a good answer. Is this person going to live over at the fire department, or are they going to go sit with the IT people? And are they 100% dedicated to you, or are you only having a portion of their time?
So if I may answer that one, this is a person that we haven't really decided exactly where this person would reside.
Okay.
And it's not specific to the fire department, but it is specific to public safety data. And
they might only get a portion of that.
Correct.
That's good to know. Then I wanted to ask, there's 2 other positions. One's a fire equipment service technician and one's an equipment supply technician. Now, I didn't hear any. I heard 0 were recommended. So these 2 would not be recommended for funding. Is that right?
That's my understanding of what the city manager is recommending.
Okay. And then there's other items here, like computer replacements, PPE or personal protective equipment, turnouts, fleet, station repairs. Has the manager made different recommendations on those than what you've proposed?
Again, I think the city manager has not made any recommendations specific to fire to fund any of those positions.
No, it's not a position, it's items, like it's
I misspoke, you're correct. The manager has not made a recommendation to fund any of those items.
Okay, I need to understand if not made a recommendation or made a 0 recommendation.
I guess 0 recommendation would be.
Okay, so if in the manager's recommended budget, there would be no additional PPE for 62,000, no station repairs for 100 grand. You would not do the unfunded comp payouts for 344,000. Am I reading this? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
Well, or to Debbie and Doug. I mean, I know Debbie, you really care about unfunded, liabilities.
So we've been working incrementally to get these things funded over time. But again, if you recall, our last session, we talked about a significant structural deficit in the budget. So as we've looked at, you know, the needs of the entire organization and across the organization, the recommendations coming forward from the city manager are
To
they're
not do it
very,
at this time.
there's not a lot there.
I got
So
you.
it
That's
was-
fine. It's
it's
okay.
very
I'm
targeted.
not criticizing anyone. I
No,
just want to
and-
make sure I
and-
understand.
and-
And one more thing on severance. So that means if someone leaves and you owe them, you know, you have the liability for vacation or
Mhm.
anything else owing, that would fall under the severance.
Correct.
And that's always good to fund because at least a portion of it, because people are going to leave. And so
And-
that'll
and
put
they
you in a
do-
hole.
They do have a severance budget within their department, a line item for severance. This is just to add to it. Again, as we are looking to make our budget more sustainable, those are areas that we do need to add funding to, but we have to do it very incrementally over time.
Okay.
Because we don't want to do it all at once because then we would have nothing.
And then
Council-
lastly,
Were we-
$2 million. Okay, I'll ask one last question. $2
No,
million.
no, no, no. Let's do another round because we need to move
Another
on.
round. Okay.
Yeah. If chosen, we'll do another round.
Okay.
Uh,
Or we'll have our 1 minute.
Councilwoman Jordan? No questions? Anyone else? Okay, go ahead and then let's go ahead and back to you, Councilwoman Dewar, and let you finish your last question. We'll come back to you, Councilwoman Breckus.
Okay. My last portion was, you had a 1.9 million for staff overtime and callback. So you're saying that that's not included in the budget. So what I don't know is what is in the budget for overtime and callbacks. Is there a like amount of money already, or is this the entire callback overtime budget?
No, they have, I don't know the exact number, but it's over $1 million in overtime in their budget, and callback's a separate line item. But yes, these are additions to the existing budget.
That's
Okay,
correct.
so for going forward, an idea for you guys, just to make this a little more transparent to us. It would be good to add one more column. Looks like you have space on your page. And I'm not even saying for, you know, these next meetings, but to think about is what's in there now? What are they asking for additional? So then we can do a comparison, like, are they asking to double the amount of overtime or just add 20%? Are they asking for, you know, there's already 100,000 for PPE and they're asking for another 100,000. Those kind of comparisons when you're doing this level of budget analysis for us is very, very helpful. So we don't have it today, and that's why I keep
Right.
asking questions. So I'll leave it at that.
One thing I would like to remind the council of is the conversation we had regarding the SAFER grant and the
Yeah.
fact that should reduce the overtime needs for the department. So again,
Absolutely.
we're really waiting to see what happens with that SAFER grant to
Okay.
see how we need to move this department forward.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
I
Thank
was
you.
going to mention
Before we
that,
go-
and also that the current budget is about 2 million, just under $2 million for overtime.
Thank you. That's Councilwoman Jordan, and then I have a question, then I'll go back to you, Councilwoman Breckus.
Thank you very
Councilwoman,
much. Thank you. And my question was along those lines. So if I'm understanding correctly, the overtime budget was 2 million. It is adding another million or reducing it to 1 million in anticipation of getting the 20 safer? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand, you know, the comments that the additional 20 firefighters will reduce our overtime, but I'm hearing there's still $1 million in overtime in there. So I'm just trying to understand where we were, where we are, and what might get adjusted.
So
good question.
to tie it back to the meeting when we talked about it, or what we talked about in SAFER, this ask assumes no SAFER grant.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
that
we
makes-
will revisit
probably the-
this, assuming we get the safer grant, we will revisit. Okay, as Ms. Lochner said, I was just trying to understand from what number we started. And, okay, thank you.
certainly.
Thank you. It just answered my question too. So Councilwoman Breckus?
Yeah, and
No.
I would presume if we got the SAFER grant, we'd have to dig up some money to outfit those people coming on, or is that in the budget?
There is a need for $200,000 to outfit them. That's a one-time cost.
Okay.
The SAFER
okay.
grant would fund 2.3 million in salaries and benefits.
And then you know, since we skipped yesterday, unfortunately, on the macro stuff, I did notice on page 15 of the presentation by Ms. Lochner, general fund liability expenditure changes that I guess in 2019 we started cutting out money for heart and lung workman's comp where we hadn't done that before, and this year we really jumped that up to 714,000 from 210 back in 2019. So it's a $500,000 jump, general fund jump. And also the general workman's comp has increased also. What is heart and lung just for firefighters, or police officers are eligible, right?
Yes, police officers are also
I
eligible.
believe public safety, correct.
Okay, so I guess my question is, why did we separate these out? And you know, it's a big jump that's coming out, but it's the liability, so it's what we're paying for those who are already on that on those claims, or are these premium costs? No, they're premiums.
So these are our unfunded liabilities. So it's not all premium. It also goes in to fund the longer term liability as well, to get us up to that 80% confidence level that we can pay out the claims. So again, this is an incremental increase to that fund. Heart-lung got pulled out really because it has become a much larger program as a presumption, and that it only applies to the safety unit. So we have to kind of do the actuarial a little differently.
Oh, okay, I get that. Thanks.
All right, is there any other comments or questions? I think we're going to move on to the next item. Or Ms. Lochner, did you have last comments? Or Chief Cochran, did you have last comments?
No, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry my phone was ringing. Appreciate it, and we'll move on. Thank you.
At this time, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, we will now move over Police Chief Jason Soto to give his presentation on the police department.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Chief Soto.
How are you? It's happy to be here for the record. Reno Police Chief Jason Soto, here to share with you our presentation for the Reno Police Department. And just give me 1 minute and I will get to the next slide here. Okay, so our first slide shows our org chart for our organization. As you can see at the top, we have 470 approximately full-time positions with the Reno Police Department, making this your largest department within the city. And it's all broken down. We've revamped our org chart to make it more efficient based off of some of the changes that your Reno Police Department has made over the course of the last several years. And we think this is a lot more efficient and a much better flow to it. So moving on, I'm going to get into our departmental core services. The first bullet you see here is community service officers. These are our non-sworn officers that work out for the most part in patrol, taking non-emergency type calls. It's a very efficient program that we've had for several decades now that allows us to bring in non-sworn members of the department at a lower rate of pay to handle a significant amount of the reports made by our community and our citizens. The next bullet point is crime prevention, and that's really our patrol as we all know it. It's divided up into, for us, for our department, into 3 districts: North, South, and Central. Within those districts, we have 11 beats within our North District, 14 within our South District, and 6 within our Central District. That being said, we are more of a district-driven police department today because we simply don't have the amount of officers to work in every one of those beats. So many officers will work more than one beat just to get that spread of coverage for the really just the growth that we've had in our city over the past several decades. But that's the core of our crime prevention division. Of course, we have dispatch. They are the foundation, I believe, of operations for both police and fire. Our downtown police, you'll see our downtown police at a lot of our events. Much of that is composed of our bike teams, our DET team. We have 2 separate DET teams so that we have 7-day-a-week coverage. Of course, we have gang enforcement in here. We have investigations. That would be our detective divisions. They cover everything from fraud, burglary, sex crimes, robbery, homicide unit, all of our special investigation type units. Program and service management, those are non-sworn. Things like our victim services unit within the Reno Police Department. Of course, we have our records and ID division, which you'll hear a little bit more about later in this presentation and some of the challenges that they face. Our traffic division, which is our motors, our DUI investigative units, our crash units, and then our training division, which handles all the training for not only our new recruits, but our mandatory post-required training throughout our organization. Those are our basic core services that we provide within the Reno Police Department. Moving on to the next slide, talk about a few of our top accomplishments. We listed led local, state, and federal law enforcement partners in the creation of regional units to improve investigations into several areas, including human trafficking and exploitation investigations, narcotics investigations, interdiction investigations, and others. The reason that I listed this on here, and it's important for all of you to understand, is there has been a struggle, as all of you know, for as long as we can probably all remember, certainly as long as all of you have been on council, on how to fund and get better coverage with our officers. One of the ways to achieve that was to start working in coordination with Washoe County Sheriff's Office and the Sparks Police Department, creating some of these regional teams. It gives us additional coverage. It crosses intercity lines and county lines, which helps us quite a bit in our investigations. And it's been very effective. We've had this in place for just a little over a year now. And our crime statistics, our arrest rates are as efficient as they've ever been. And I believe that's a direct result of these regional units. The next bullet is increased staffing to community action and outreach unit and coordinate with the city's Clean and Safe program in anticipation of the upcoming CARES campus. I think all of you know that this has been a really big challenge for all of us. I understand that it's a very sensitive topic and discussion. And we've really been working with partners and different groups, advocates, to really get a better understanding of how to have a better effect on this topic within our community. But we did increase staffing to that team. They don't only deal with those types of issues either. Our community action and outreach team really looks at difficult issues throughout our community, whether it be, it could be anything from a traffic problem to an area of our city that has experienced extreme growth, and we've seen an increase in crime rate. It could be a wide variety of topics, and we'll really put them out there to do a deep dive into what that looks like and give us some suggestions on how to improve the crime rate in those affected areas. And then finally, on our last accomplishment is we provided mandatory training and cultural competence to all department personnel. I think that's important for all of our council to understand that we understand all the issues and challenges that we have surrounding law enforcement, not only here in the city of Reno, but throughout this world. That's one of the things that we had put into place before a lot of these events took place, which worked out very well for us timing wise. We had some challenges getting it throughout the entire department because of COVID, but I'm happy to say that we did all of that. Now that cultural competency training that we've received is in addition to the required post mandates for different types of training that was put into place at the last special session. So this is an additional block of training that we were able to give to every single employee, sworn and non-sworn, in the Reno Police Department. For major initiatives and strategies, improve compliance with public records requests, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, otherwise known as NIBRS, reporting requirements. These are two really huge increases that we've seen in the last 12 months that have just skyrocketed in terms of the amount of work that it has presented itself to our records division. NIBRS is replacing our old reporting system of numbers that we report to the FBI, our old UCR numbers. And it's just a much more extensive deep dive into all of these crimes that we have to report. It's mandatory through our federal partners to receive grants and funding that is essential to be effective, to have an effect on crime in our region. Those increased data requests that we put on records really just about triples the amount of data entry that they have to, at least triples the amount of data entry that they had to enter before. So the requests and the backlog of our NIBRS entries has grown. We've taken some measures to address those growing increases in NIBRS reporting, but this is it's a federally mandated request. Again, it's unfunded, so we have to find ways to be more efficient with obviously less employees, and I know you're all aware of that. The other one is public records requests. Those have gone up significantly. We have done our due diligence to make it easier for people to get public records requests, but in doing so, what we've recognized is that those requests have gone up tenfold, and it's a lot of work when you think about some of these public records requests that we receive and have to work through. Some of them could take a whole shift just to hash out one or two requests. So we're working on those as well. It's just a challenging lift, but again, we're doing everything within our means to improve and become more efficient with what we do have for those initiatives and strategies. The second bullet point is seek funding from Washoe County 911, the 911 Board, Emergency Response Advisory Committee, to implement a car dash camera system in all marked police vehicles to enhance community trust and improve transparency. We have gotten this approved through the 911 Board. We are now just simply waiting on, there is a new version of the dash cam that Axon is going to release within the next month or two. As soon as that new version 3.0 is here, we're going to install that in all of our marked cars. And this is just, again, another effort to increase community trust and transparency with our community. We were the first ones to implement it in terms of the body cameras way back when, prior to before it was even law. And we've had very few issues with putting that into place, and we don't see any issues coming forward on the dash cams either. And then the last major initiative and strategy is of course to increase sworn staffing levels to keep up with departmental attrition and to keep up with growth of the community. We've had some really good success with civil service and their department in terms of keeping up with attrition. They've made some changes that have made it much easier for us to fill these holes once an officer retires. We've gone over it many times on what the challenges are for an officer when he or she decides to test, all the way up to when he or she is on the street on their own. It takes quite a bit of time and quite a bit of investment. And we've made some great strides there. As you're aware, we changed some of our background measures or bars, if you will, to be more inclusive and to get more applicants on our lists. And it seems to have worked out quite well. And then growth of the community. Look, we're at right around 300,000 people now in Reno as a region. It's about 500,000. And if you just look around and you see all the development, I'm sure you all share the same concern that I do with how do we address all of that. That top accomplishment was one of the areas where I think we've made some strides in that. Those regional teams that I spoke of, what they are able to do is they're able to focus on things like crime trends. So for instance, we just had a recent rash of commercial storage unit burglaries. We put one of those regional units on it and we had an arrest within about a week and a half. So they're able to identify those trends and make those arrests, to where in the past we would have to rely on patrol to do that. So we're squeezing everything we can out of the 337-ish sworn positions that we have today to keep up with that growth. In terms of size, I think we're closer to 130 square miles of footage now. And I know I've shared this with you before. When I started my career, it was at 55 square miles. So we've almost tripled in size in terms of area of coverage. So we have a lot of area that we have to, obviously, that we have to cover. That's our major initiative and strategies. Moving on to the next slide. I have just the financial summary, and as you can see, 2022 proposed budget for your police department is $86 million. Most of that, 77 million of that, is for wages and salaries. I know that Chief Cochran spoke to. That kind of just is what it is. Services and supplies. That's to outfit an entire department. And then some capital outlay. We've also, if you've been paying attention to your Reno Police Department, we've really made a lot of efforts to come in under budget as much as we can. We understand that we are the largest budgetary piece of the city of Reno, and we understand that if we're to go over budget, it would affect other areas within the city and other departments. So we've done our due diligence to make sure that that we don't do that. But those numbers kind of speak for itself. And if you have any questions on that, of course, we can talk about it after this last slide. The last slide are the funding requests. We switched our approach in terms of some of our funding requests that I shared with our city manager, and it starts off with police assistance. And one of the areas where we've really suffered within the Reno Police Department is our support staff. We simply have not hired much, if any, support staff since our recession days of when we had all of the layoffs and the people that had retired. We realize and recognize that with all of this growth and all of this additional demands by different reporting measures and just technology and just how much more we're bringing in, we need support staff to support the work that our sworn officers and different units are doing. So for the first three pieces, you'll see a police assistance. Two of those would be specific for some of the challenges that I expressed to you earlier, which is NIBRs and public records requests. Next on the list is community service officers. Our community service officers are incredible in terms of what they do and the amount of work that they turn out for the city of Reno. They're very well received by the department and officers because the officers are allowed to be a little bit more proactive on their shifts if our community service officers are taking those paper reports. So you see a request in there for community service officers because they're always beneficial to us. We have our dispatchers in there. Dispatch has been, as we grow in public safety and as we grow in size, their call volume just goes up and up and up. There is a request on there. We recognize this need for dispatchers. They are the wheels, I suppose, of this giant machine that's called public safety. And they work their tails off, and they deserve they certainly deserve a lot of credit for all the work they do. We have police recruits in there. I'll never stop asking for police officers because the growth that we're experiencing, it concerns me as much as it concerns all of you. But again, we are taking measures to be more efficient and more effective with what we do have. I put a lieutenant on here because I think as we grow as a department, oversight is critical and crucial to make sure that our department, our officer is being managed as efficiently as possible. That lieutenant, right now we have 5 patrol lieutenants. We certainly could use another patrol lieutenant for not only our regional operations, but maybe share some of that patrol work as well. You have to understand the rank of lieutenant falls right below our deputy chiefs and our commanders. And oftentimes our lieutenants are the most senior official within the city of Reno making decisions on behalf of myself or our agency. It's just an important position to have. Public safety dispatch supervisor, we had two billets for that just has to do with, again, their growth that they have as they take on more employees. They too would need more oversight. And then the last two positions that you see here are a criminalist and then a forensic supervisor. These positions are important. I know they're important to myself, and I hope I can speak on behalf of our city manager, just because as you're aware, there was a separation between the exchange of services that we had in place for the past several decades with Washoe County for dispatch for forensic services. And essentially, Washoe County stood up their own dispatch and now are looking at charging the city of Reno for forensic services. My thought on this is I understand that the growth in forensics has gone up because as we get more and more scientific in our profession, FIS, as we know it, the demand goes up and up, and it becomes more and more large. I think it's something that the Reno Police Department should really take a hard look at to ultimately, at some point in the future, stand up our own FIS. But for these two positions in particular, a criminalist positions and forensic supervisor position, they would do a lot of that front end work that we would need in order to expand our forensic capabilities at the Reno Police Department. Now, this is not something that would happen overnight. When I talk about forensics as a whole, it's something that would take probably a decade before it was fully in place. But there's things that can contribute to, a lot of the equipment and things that we would need to have our own forensics division within the city of Reno. I can tell you that as the city of Reno, we provide the largest amount of FIS requests. I think the report I saw from county was about 37% of all forensic requests that they get come from the city of Reno. So there's certainly a need, and those requests can be anything from, forensics on shell casings, drugs, blood, toxicology, all these different types of forensics that are used in our profession today. And that has become a little bit more pressing because of this separation of exchange for services between the city of Reno and Washoe County. And with that, I am available for any questions or input that any of you may have.
Thank you. Let's go to Councilwoman Jordan to ask the first question this round.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chief, for always giving such a great presentation and kind of summarizing it in a way that's easily digestible for these meetings, which can be a little long. Appreciate that. I guess my question is probably more focused on the forensic issue. I guess I'm a little confused. I thought Reno was in Washoe County. A little confused with that. So talk to me about how what this unwinding of the forensic and standing our own up, what does that even look like? And
Well,
I'm trying to understand why we would need to do that.
so we've had conversations, as you're aware, in the past about forensics and where that tax revenue comes from and whether or not that's something separate of what we get as Washoe County citizens. I know that our city attorney's office has taken a long, hard look at that. But that could take some time to unwind that and find out, get some type of legal ruling, if you will. In the meantime, we can't stop what we're doing. So we have several options in front of us, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but one of them would be to take a look at the contract the county has provided us and pay those costs, which in time would be about $2.1 million per year for a full outfit of forensics. So basically, if we wanted their services, full forensic services, that would be the cost. If we wanted all the lab work, but not the positions, the last two positions that I spoke of, it would be about $1.6 million. Whenever numbers like that present themselves to me, and I know I can probably speak for our city manager, we have to do our due diligence in terms of looking at cost reductions and cost savings. So we've looked at several different outfits that do the same type of work that we get currently, but at a different location. The specific one that we've been looking at is based out of Richmond, California, for a cost significantly less than this 1.6 to 2.1 million that it would cost us per year in services. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't come without a lot of technical challenges. We've been vetting that out for several months now once we heard about this split in exchange for services. So we've been preparing for this so that we can be in a position come July 1 to either sign some type of contract with Washoe County that works for us and our funding, or to move in another direction, start providing some of our own, and then hopefully, like I said, I won't be here, but a decade from now, having our own forensics division. I think it's an important thing to have because it allows me or your police chief to prioritize the what, whens, and wheres and how we do that. I'm not saying that Washoe County doesn't do a fantastic job because they do. They have an incredible forensics unit and they've worked extremely well with the city of Reno. This just really comes down to costing. I know it's not as small as forensics. I know there's a lot of large scale talks with county on a lot of different topics and subjects. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that we haven't had an incredible working relationship with the sheriff's office and them processing our work. We've had many instances where we needed something right away and they're always right there to do that for us. It just comes with the cost. It's not free for them to do. I understand that. But at the same time, I have to look at what is most efficient and what's most cost effective for the Reno Police Department. I hope that answers some of your question.
It did. It raises others, but that's a bigger discussion for another day. I have another question, but I'll wait till we go around.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilman Woman Jardin. Councilman Dewar, let's go with you.
Sure. Yeah. Again, Chief Soto, thank you so much. As Councilman Jardin said, you always do a great job in these presentations. One thing I think that helped you do a great job is that your additional funding requests seem to only have staff in them. And the other, when we looked at fire, it was a mix of funding line items mixed in with staffing. And just a note to our manager, it might be good going forward to have just staffing on one page and just other additional things on another page so that they're not mixed in. Now, this leads me to a question for you, Chief. Do you have other things besides staffing that you are asking for?
Not outside of some of the requests that we bring forward to you, depending on the time of year that we fund out of our own budget. So like in terms of equipment and things of that nature, not really.
Okay. All right, but
I'll
I don't
let-
see any, so I assume there are none, but assuming is not a good thing to do in any field, so.
There's always a couple of, Councilwoman Dewar, there's always a couple of things that are like funding requests for, like, if we bring on a new officer, he or she needs equipment that goes with it and things like that. But vehicles and supplies,
The same as
things
last
like
year.
that are not included in these requests.
But I
Okay,
mean, we
so-
assume that it's the same as last year.
Yes.
It's a zero, it's a hold your own budget with addition of staff. How many of these staff are you proposing to help with this new forensic office?
Well, I've had many conversations with our city manager and finance on this topic. And I think initially, to start off, for what we need, we're fortunate in that we have CSOs and that we already have them out in the field. So we would need, if you go to the last page, the funding request page,
Right, I'm there.
we would need, to do this correctly, we would need 2 criminalists, and we would need a forensic supervisor. In addition with those requests, we could use our community service officers to do some of our current already funded community service officers that we already have out in the field. We'd have to get them some training to go back to being crime scene investigative qualified. But many, many years ago, when I began my career, they were. That was something that we had throughout. So we can do that again with.
Well,
with
here's a
little
little bit confusing because you don't
Okay.
have 2 criminalists in this list. It just has 0. It says a number.
Yeah.
but-
We didn't really know. I believe that when this was put together, Councilwoman Dewar, I apologize, we were working out some of the logistics as to what that was going to look like and what we could, how we could make this work with what we currently had in place. So there was a couple of unknowns that have since become known. So the request on number 9 for the criminalist would be 2.0.
And is the
2.00.
dollar double? Like instead of
Yes.
158, it's like 3, whatever.
I think the total for a criminalist with the one-time and annual is 158, so that would double to about 316. Yeah.
So, and lastly, I guess because time constraints. Now 43. Two things really I want to say. I understand the argument you're making about the forensic, but I have to say, I'm going to have to say this: is this the year? And I understand we're in this dispute, but I can't imagine this dispute. Like, this dispute makes no sense to me. Like, why don't we go solve the dispute? Like, I don't understand. Like, let's take our toys, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but let's take our stuff and leave and go do our own thing, stand up a duplicative service. You're making an argument perhaps that in larger places, they might have separate forensic outfits for a county and a city. Is that your argument ultimately?
It's not so much an argument, Councilwoman Dewar. I think the challenge that we have faced with us is, and I didn't get really technical into some of the forensic discussions, and I'd be happy to have a one-off with you in terms of some of that. But Washoe County has a large forensics division, and to fund that forensic division comes at a cost. The city of Reno doesn't necessarily need all of those positions and all of those types of requests that we receive. And I don't want to throw any stones. I don't want to speak out of turn. And I don't want to step on the city manager's toes, but there's a lot of technical logistics, finite details, and it really comes down to dollars and cents. Do we want to pay for a service that we're getting for Washoe County at a higher rate to simplify the process?
I think
do we
a
wanna
way
do
to
it on
say
our
this,
own?
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're
No
out of
problem.
time. So just if I could summarize, if you'll just
We're
give
out
me
of
1
time.
second, Madam Vice Mayor. What you're saying is they do this, we only need this. So for the dollar, if we spent the dollar on what we actually need, we might get more bang for our buck. Is that like a way to
Yeah.
say? what you're saying?
That's
Okay.
yes. Thanks for simplifying that, but yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Great. Councilwoman Breckus?
Thanks, Chief, for the presentation. And I know how stretched you guys are. You know, the sprawl land use decisions really pressure your organization the most, I think, more than fire. So the question that I have also on forensics is, you know, I think we've only received one memo on this. It might have even been before Mr. Thornley came in, but what is the demand letter from the county? Like, do we have to think that this is a hanging chad for this budget if things don't get resolved? I think that's a fair question. Are you going to show up in September to us and say, we need to augment?
So, Councilmember Breckis, it's not as you said, a hanging chad. We will not show up in September. To the extent it's not resolved, it will be built into the final budget presented to you.
At what date?
In May.
Okay, so we will know in May, and as soon as you can, what number should we be plugging in the back of our head here?
For forensic services, if
Yes.
undertaken by ourselves, Chief, it's what? It's 1.3.
Yeah, I would guesstimate City Manager Thornley at about 1.3 to 1.4.
And what's the contracting demand from the county?
2.1.
2.1. So,
Well, I'm sorry, for clarification, it's 2.1 in its final form. The county would phase it over 4 years, but there is no escape clause in its present form.
okay,
So that's what we're working on.
so this is
with the
council
county.
in previous budget years that has spent like 25 minutes on $25,000 considerations. So I really think that this needs to not hang out there much longer in this cycle. I need to say that there. Number two, the lieutenant. I know that we have a very modest performance audit, you know, looking at the department to see, you know, operations and internal structure, but I thought we had a lieutenant over internal affairs. And when I looked at the org chart, it looks like we have sergeants there. Was a decision made to not have a lieutenant over internal affairs?
No, we do have a lieutenant in internal affairs. I believe on the org chart, Councilwoman Breckis, that lieutenant reports directly to me. So it might, it could be clarified a little bit better in the org chart, but we do have a lieutenant that has oversight of internal affairs.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
that's, you know, to the degree of, I know what's going on. All I know is from the 1999 audit that it is a best practice to have a lieutenant over internal affairs.
We do, and we have the two sergeants that you spoke of earlier as well.
Okay, so your top request, I mean, for the support staff, is that going to help you with these records requests? I mean, are we going to make any movement on these records requests? Because I hear my ears are full of records requests not being filled, and it's tiresome. And I know it's a big obligation, but
Yeah, that is the number one priority. That is really one of the reasons that you see a change in the funding requests of what you've seen in years past. And those police assistants would be specifically assigned and trained to work on that exclusively, because I don't think that the records requests are going to lessen. I think they're going to increase as the size of our community and just public records requests come in. I think it's going to increase, and we're going to have to continue to address it.
well, and I'm going to be following up with the manager and trying to understand, because it's been very important to me when I came on here in 2012 to see certain positions reestablished. And the last one, there's still one out there that I really want to see that support all departments, was the records manager, and that's in the clerk. And so, you know, I don't know if a records support for PD should be under that records manager because it's a particular expertise. I don't know if it's technical over there, but that's something we don't need that answer now, but I really do want to help police with records, but I also want a records manager to bring what expertise, you know, that function does citywide. And then the last question is,
Breckis, I'm sorry. We're over, so we'll probably.
I will wait. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think there's any other questions, so I'm going to make one comment or question. And For many years, I've known about the forensics between Washoe County and the city of Reno. And I am very concerned about going off on our own. And I'm going to just put that out there. I know forensics, the Washoe County's forensics, do many other communities in this state, many of them. And I think that we have to make this one of our question and answers more. We have to have more conversation about this. And I think that this is one of those that we need to pull out and talk about this, because for me, I think the council needs to have more conversation about this before we get to the actual final budget. So I just want to throw that out. I know the purposes, I know what you're saying, but I also think that we have to see realistically why it hasn't worked for the city of Reno to work with them. And I think it's an important issue because they're already there. They're already doing service with many other communities, counties, cities, lots of cities, but with the city. So we have to have more conversation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Weber. And I can assure you that both myself and City Manager Thornley are having those conversations that you spoke of, that you alluded to regularly. And we're still having that open dialogue. And I know that we're trying to find something that works for both the city of Reno, Washoe County, and our community, to be frank.
Right. And I appreciate that, but I think the council needs to hear and be involved with more of this. That's my 2 cents. Thank you. Okay, then we'll go back around. Councilwoman Jardin, we're going to go just back around the same way. Councilwoman Jardin.
Thank you very much. One comment about the forensic, then we'll move on. And then one question about the administrative support. I think just from sitting where I sit, and I know there's always conversations that don't always make it all the way up to us before it becomes a public discussion. And probably that's my level of frustration, is how it all kind of came to be as a directive to, drop a invoice on the city and start charging us. And that's how it felt. I know there's probably much more to the backstory, and to Vice Mayor Weber's comments, we probably need just more information on that front. Because I'm certain there are actions we could have taken as a city on many fronts, and we chose not to in an effort of collaboration. So on many other subjects. So my question is, though, on the administrative side, you had a couple of positions in there for folks to not only process records more expeditiously or efficiently, but it was about filling out reports, as I understood it, or taking reports. And I was trying to understand from the end user standpoint, we have a process where people have to go online to fill out a report. And there's been vocal, frustration with having to go online to, fill out a report for a non-emergency sort of action. Will this mitigate that in any way, or will that process still be in place? Will there be any more calls where police show up versus you have to go online?
Well, so yeah, with COVID, our front desk had made that reporting process pretty challenging because we shut down our front desk. We've since reopened that. We did send out a press release and shared it with council. And we actually added an additional day now. So instead of just Monday through Friday, we now have Monday through Saturday. So if somebody works Monday through Friday and they need to file that report, they can do so on a weekend, which has really helped quite a bit. And we also had some attrition that we achieved by some people that had retired. And we are now only down one body. In fact, we just hired one of our new police service specialists. That's essentially the front desk, our customer service portion of the Reno Police Department. And we are, so now if you're a citizen that wants to file a report, you can, obviously you have our sworn component. We have our online reporting component, but we also have our front desk component. And we can use all three of those measures to file a report. So I think that will, I think that was a side effect of COVID more than anything. And we have, we're back open.
That's good that people will be able to get a live person to help walk them through that process when they've just, had an incident, which is jarring, no doubt. And so I appreciate that. I think that gives a level of support and understanding and guidance that just directing someone to online was frustrating for many. So I thank you for that. The other thing is to Councilwoman Breckis's comments. I too worry about the production of records and more, the length of time to get those out. And I know those are very labor intense and specialized. One of the frustrating things that I saw or heard from was a records request that took, if I remember correctly, took almost a year to get a response back that said, legally, we don't have to give you that, or something in that process. I feel like it's one of those instances to all of our public, if they're going to get an answer as to no, can we give them that answer no more expeditiously and move on? I think that just adds insult to injury when it's a year later and someone says, no, you can't have that record for whatever legal reasons. And they're like, well, why couldn't you told me, 11 and a half months ago? It just seems like that part of the equation could have been sped up.
I can speak to that too as well, Councilwoman Jordan. One of the things that happened when we moved to simplifying records requests was a lot of that work that was tasked with our city clerk, who is the expert on records. Some of that was transferred over to the Reno Police Department because the volume just went up. And since that time, our records division has worked with Ashley and her team to understand exactly what records requests look like. We've done training for them to understand the whats, the whens, the wheres, to be more efficient. Because I agree, I know it's frustrating when you ask for a public records request and just aren't getting the reply that you should expect. So that's not something that we have ignored, and it's something that we've moving forward as well with any new additional positions to make sure that they have that training to identify those requests.
Thank you very much.
Be better at it.
Yes, and Vice Mayor Weber, I'll finish up. Just sometimes the common courtesy of we're working on it, we're trying to get to it as quickly as we can really mitigate some of the stuff. So thank you for that.
You're right. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, I'll say ditto to those comments about just that interaction with the public. They often just need, the common courtesy, the hand holding and that kind of thing. Just any kind of human kindness, especially when they're in those kind of situations, which I know you know. I want to have this round for me, two things. Community services officers. Maybe this is a wrong question, but I'm going to ask it, see what you say. Could these be social workers instead?
No.
Maybe I don't understand the job.
Yeah, the community service officers are not, well, first of all, they're not qualified to be social workers. And
no, I'm saying instead of actually having officers doing whatever they do, could we have a different kind of person do that job?
Well, we could, but they do such an extraordinary amount of what we just talked about, which is that human interaction. So our community service officers are, let's just say we have a residential burg with an elderly victim. And he or she wants to file a police report, but can't make it to the station. And that happens a lot more often than we think. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have to necessarily even be a crime report. It could be something that they need from the Reno Police Department. That's what we use our community service officers for. They're to supplement our sworn police officers so they can go out and essentially get the real bad guys, if you will. And they handle an extraordinary amount of paperwork. And when I say extraordinary amount of paperwork, I know this because I at one point was a community service officer 20 some odd years ago. Up to 20 reports a day that they're managing, and they're very proficient. And when you don't have the need for a sworn officer, you don't have the need for that extended time on a call. Okay. So I think it would just be crippling to our community if we were to
So clearly I didn't understand the job. So was my point. And so I'm going to challenge you for a future day. I don't really want you to answer now. So I want you to think about this. Is there any job in the police department that maybe is a sworn officer today or a different kind of person that could be replaced with a different kind of person who is not I'll use the term cop? who is a different profession. I know you've already filled in with, you know, for example, we have a whole volunteer organization to help people that have had a violent crime in their world, tips, right? Those kind of things. But what I'm saying is, out working with the public, does everybody need to be a sworn officer? Can they be replaced by a different person? And I seriously don't want you to answer right now because I have a different question in my few minutes. The biggest request you have is for 12 public safety dispatch trainee officers. Now, I have sat for hours with your dispatch. I know what they do. I have lived their dream. I've only lived their dream one day, not day after day, you know. I know you need more. But 12, is that like an entire separate crew? What are you trying to accomplish here with this? Could you just explain that?
So the number looks large, and it is. 12 is a large request, and I think it's more of a understanding that dispatch is often the forgotten wheel with public safety. And anytime, for instance, on our last budget where we got a position, one of the few positions that we got was a dispatcher. And anytime we can add a dispatcher, it wouldn't be a new team. They work shifts, you know, it's shift work, you know, there's graveyard day and swing shift. But just filling in some of those holes, there's a lot of mandatory overtime that is handed out to our dispatch just because we only have so many dispatchers.
So you think it would help cut down overtime by having these additional dispatchers, excuse me. That's one. And two, it sounds like you think the workload demand is large enough. And do we have space in dispatch to fit 12 more people, or what's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, even if we got all 12, which I know we wouldn't, again, it's shift work, so they would go in shifts. We have space, you know, for them to work. I think what would happen what will happen when we add additional dispatchers is it allows us to become more efficient at different things. For instance, sometimes we don't have enough dispatch to open up multiple channels. So you've got only one channel for north, south, and central Reno, which is a lot of call volumes, and you have officers stepping over other officers' calls. It could provide things, it could get rid of things like officer safety issues and things like that come up with just not having enough staff.
Okay, I'm gonna have a final round when we go one more time.
Okay, if we go out one more time. Do we choose to go another round? Oh, Councilman Delgado, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that I didn't notice that. So would you like to ask your questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Yeah, I've been watching. My video's been off, but appreciate everyone's, my colleagues' questions and the Chief's presentation. Chief, the asks that you put before us, is that, I know this growing as a community to meet the needs of a community, but have you, as part of your asks, also a direct collaboration with requests that you've seen from the community? I say that from last year's conversations, the deep conversations we've had with community members in terms of how we're going to reach those conversations that we hear about constantly in terms of email and outreach. Do you feel the requests that you're asking of us are going to fulfill those needs?
Thank you for the question, Councilman. Yeah, I do. I'll just give you a couple examples as we go through it. For instance, the police assistance, as you're aware, you know, we've had some challenges with public records requests and entering in NIBRS data. All of that information that we're sharing through NIBRS gives our community, gives our state a better picture and a better understanding of what we do and what types of reports and what types of crimes are occurring within the city of Reno. And I know that's always been a priority for you to understand just what that crime picture snapshot looks like. Community service officers, I think that's just an essential need. And I know that you've gotten a lot of that down in your ward in terms of having officers respond. A lot of folks don't have the ability to either file a report online. Maybe they don't, maybe they're Spanish speaking. They need a Spanish speaker to go down and take a report from them. Community service officers fill that hole incredibly well. Police recruits, I think, are self-explanatory. That just has to do with the growth that we're achieving as a region. We all see it, and I think we all feel it. And then the dispatchers, I think that with additional dispatchers, it just keeps our community safer. It allows us to communicate with all of these calls that are coming into our call center to get officers out there in a timely and efficient manner. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think my questions also were in line with Councilwoman Dewar's with respect to just new best practice, innovative kind of positions that have been created as we see across the nation, and if we've taken those within our own, with our own department, and considered those as we start to just kind of change the way we police, changing the way we police, so to say, in terms of our build out. I only imagine those conversations are going to continue to come, especially as we start to feel more comfortable about attending meetings or going to community events. That those conversations aren't. Those are opportunities that the silver lining in many different ways are opportunities for us to kind of see those best practices at play, learn more about them, and bring them into the budget conversation. So, no, but everything you're saying, of course I support, and I know we need all of it in terms of a general bandwidth, but those are some other dynamics that I'm in line with Councilwoman Dewar in terms of asking. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm last, the second round. And I think we do need to go back through the third round. I see that there's enough questions. So, but I would like to ask our manager that we make the forensics, as we talked about it early on. I already asked that, I guess, the last time, but I just want to make sure that we noted that it could be something that we have more discussion about, if we could, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to ask. So I believe that there is a concept that we want to go forward on a third round. So I'm going to go back to Councilwoman Jardin.
Excuse me, you skipped me,
Oh,
I think, on the second
I'm
round.
sorry. I am so sorry, Councilwoman Breckus.
And I'm good. I'm good from here on out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I'm fine discussing forensics more. I think it's probably needed, sooner than later. I just want to be on record that, Reno's a very stressed organization, fast growing regional, leader in the, center in the state. And, the needs to provide some sort of assistance to other smaller communities, to be the lead on. I just don't think we have that luxury, frankly. I think we need to look out what's most important to us. But I guess my question is along what Ms. Stewart was saying about, did you consider social workers? I think other police departments, maybe even in our region, are adding those, but it is difficult to innovate when you're so strapped. And we still have a police department that has fewer sworn than we had a decade ago. A place like Minnesota that's growing at about half our clip, we're growing again a third as much as them, can look at things differently. They've depopulated. We are just barely keeping up, but I do hope that we can continue to innovate. And maybe, are you seeing any opportunities out there in the grant world? I was on a conference call last week, and I heard that there was maybe some Medicare waivers to be able to do dispatch with therapists being on dispatch and that sort of
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Breckus. And I want to remind all of our council that Reno Police Department created the MOST team that we have in place today. That was established out of our agency from a couple of visionaries several decades ago. And we basically put that program into place. Obviously it grew, and now it's a region-wide function. I think that for social, and that's what it is. It's social workers working hand in hand with police departments, both Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County. Have we looked at social workers within our agencies, working within our agencies? Absolutely, we have. I know that was a request by this council some time ago. We've certainly had many discussions with the city manager as to how that would look like, but I don't want to forget the MOST team that we have in place today and how effective they've been at dealing with our challenges that we respond to daily on mental health. Is it enough? Absolutely not. I know that the mayor's been banging that drum for years. We simply don't have enough resources out there, but it's a very expensive resource. But to answer your question about having somebody within dispatch, to help to help send some of those calls to certain areas and recognize mental health when they hear it. We have had those conversations. We've had conversations about trying to increase the number of most workers and maybe have a couple that are just specific to the city of Reno and fund them that way. I know that that's a measure that some other departments in this state and in our country have done. And we've never been opposed to that. We created that. We recognized the need for social workers a long time ago, and people that are experts at dealing with a portion of our community that needs a social worker and not a police officer. And I am 100% on board with that. And I know it's something that we've had many discussions on, and it really just comes down to dollars and cents. And I didn't want to elaborate anymore because I know you didn't want me to expand on this too much. So I'm trying to kind of give you a short answer there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, then we'll go back to Councilwoman Jordan. Did you have? Okay.
I did. I said I didn't, and then I clearly was.
We'll go back another.
Thank you. I apologize. And on that point, this conversation comes up at CHAB as well. And I'll tell you where the deficit, I think, is. I think our deficit is in the relaying of the information of what we actually have and what our processes are. And I think that there's a connection there where there might be a perception in the community that there aren't social workers that are a critical component of the city of Reno, city of Sparks, and Washoe County, and of the Downtown Reno Partnership. And I think that's a big part of what we're missing. It's just that communication piece that, yes, that is a part of. And just my last 2 sentences, I too like to see this explored a little more in depth as an augmentation to our sworn officers, not a replacement of. I think there is opportunity to have those discussions, but not as a replace, but rather as an augment. I think there's value in that. So thank you.
And you just reminded me something that I forgot to mention, Councilwoman Jordan. So thank you. But I also want to let our council know that we're one of less than 2% of agencies within the United States that has an embedded resource worker, an embedded resource officer, which is a licensed therapist working within our agency to not only deal with mental health that we're talking about in the community, but also to deal with mental health that we have within our own agency and things that we're exposed to on a daily basis, which is one of the reasons that I went to Washington, D.C. As a guest of Cortez Masto to have conversations about mental health, just in this field in general. We were recognized, I know I shared with all of you at council, we were recognized nationally for our work on wellness for our officers and for our personnel. Those are all important things that we can't forget, and steps and measures that we've taken to where we've been recognized as a leader when it comes to this. Now, the overarching challenge with when we're talking about mental health is funding and resources and more people, more bodies. But we have a pretty solid foundation that you're not going to see in most areas within our nation.
Thank you. Okay, next up will be Councilwoman Dewar.
Thank you so much. And that was a great segue, Chief, to the point I wanted to make, which is that I don't think most of the public knows, no matter who they are, where our police department stands relative to the world in terms of staffing, how understaffed we are, where we're starting from. And, when we look around the country, it's kind of apples and oranges because a lot of those people were fully staffed. And what they did do was substitute people, right? As people maybe retired or positions came vacant, they were able to innovate or change it up. Where we are is, as several have said, we are behind that 8 ball, so to speak. And so we need these folks, it sounds like, and we need some other kind of folks, to complement, to continue to work with our most team and so on. So my key question here is really for our manager. And that is, this is about a 10% increase of budget. So we have about 470 FTEs today in the department. You're asking for 43. So it's 9%. My question is, what is the manager recommending at this point relative to what's being asked?
I have looked at this with the chief, and what we are trying to do is deal with the more acute issues. So that's records management and responding to those requests, making sure that we have data entered in NIBRs. We are making sure that we have the forensics buttoned up and ready to go. We are also dealing with and looking at options for how we expand the presence of the MOST program in the city. And so where we stand today, though, is there is no hard recommendation on personnel for the police department for a couple of reasons. Number one, by and large, the recommendation will be a flat budget. Number two, we are in the middle of an operational audit at the police department that will be instructive in how we respond to these requests. And number three, frankly, is sort of because it all does come down to dollars and cents. The recommendation in May as we move forward with the police department will be largely dependent on what the most acute needs are in that moment. We can't do all of the things that we want to do.
Okay.
So we'll have to triage it a little bit.
That's an incredibly helpful answer. To understand this is what our chief's saying he needs right now. Obviously, for every department we visit with, it's going to be as budget allows, but it is good to put it in context. So today, a flat budget would be 0 of these 43, and even a cut because each position has an increase. CPI has an increase, retirements, payouts, health, all these are going up. And flat budgets, they don't really accommodate for just natural increases. So you are going to have some real challenges, but it does demonstrate how out of whack, if to use that kind of phraseology, we are, and what we're struggling with here as a city. So I'm just glad to have the opportunity for you to present this to us with the knowledge that in the next 2 months, 6 weeks, you're going to have make some really hard decisions and hard recommendations to us about where we go from here. So thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I do want to say I'll be switching to my phone as soon as we end this one. So just FYI.
Okay, and I think we might be taking a break as well, like a 10-minute break. So let me go to Councilwoman Breckus, and then I'll go back to Councilman Delgado if he has the last remarks. But thank you, Councilwoman Dewar.
For the audit, but I've always found dispatch, and I've worked for cities for about 25 years now, the hardest job in a city. I really do. I think patrol is very difficult, but dispatch to me is the one. And I'm just wondering if you've come to any analysis yet to say, like you did on the fire, to say the safer grants can bring down the overtime, the one, even if it's just one more dispatch can bring down that overtime. I mean, can we get there maybe? And I know it's hard to even find those people to come in and take those jobs. Ms. Lochner?
Yeah, who's that question for, Councilwoman Breckus?
Ms. Lochner, I mean, are you calculating the dispatch overtime? Do you have that number and you can say to us, we can add one more body and make it a wash?
I don't think adding one body will have an effect on their overtime.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree with Ms. Lochner on that.
Good question. Councilwoman Breckus, do you have any other questions? You still have a couple minutes. No? Okay, thank you. Councilman Delgado, would you like to have one more question? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was waving as no. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay, then I think we've followed up with everyone, and thank you so much, Chief Soto. Just appreciate you being here. And Mr. Manager, do we have the ability to take like a 10-minute break?
Certainly do. See you at 3:15.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk? We can.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll return to, let's see, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, at this time, we will be transitioning to our next department, which is Community Development. At this time, we will move over Arlo Stockham and Angela Foose to be able to give you their brief presentation on their section of the budget.
Okie doke. Thank you so much. Here they are coming up here.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, council members. For the record, Arlo Stockham, Community Development Director, with Angela Foose, Assistant Director, here with me.
Thank you both.
Dive right in and share a screen. So, Community Development. Full screen for me, there we go. Community development staff is about 75 full-time equivalents strong. That's held steady here for the last couple of years since I've been on board. We're structured with a director and an assistant director, and then really 6 major program areas. Those areas, land use planning, very high profile. You see us in front of you frequently. Really 2 components of that: comprehensive planning, also known as long-range planning. We really have a pretty small group focused on our long-range planning efforts. 1 person, in fact, who we were just able to hire, but additional support provided by the management team. And then our current planning, development, review functions. Our building division is about half of our staff, focuses on the processing, review, and inspection of all building and construction activity in the city of Reno. Engineering division, this team, a small group of engineers, again, focusing on development, review, and inspection. They work closely with the engineers in public works, but really the difference is our engineers focus on the development projects, the private land applications, whereas public works, as the name implies, focuses on public work. Our business licensing team had a very busy year with all the COVID requirements, as did housing and neighborhood development. Traditionally, that team has focused on CDBG and home programs and housing initiatives such as that. But they've also really stepped up to deal with the homelessness challenges we've had over the last several years. And then our administrative team. This has really been an exceptionally busy year for the team at Community Development. You think back about 12 months when COVID first came to be our reality. And we all froze hiring, we froze the budget. We were really all expecting a downturn, if not a significant recession. And lo and behold, we have had record rates of construction and development activity, all-time highs. Who would have thought 12 months ago? But that's created a lot of strain, all the additional COVID requirements and the very rapid development. Essentially has been managed by a staff that was smaller than it was 2 years ago to the precautionary measures we took for COVID. So in addition to the COVID response and all the regular development processing, our top accomplishments, we had to limit it to 3. We were able to complete the comprehensive update to the zoning code. Also a lot of back office work associated with the code update. Updating our maps and our applications and our fees. We expanded the development review process to be more participatory with the public. And all of that related work was all completed in this last year. Fortunately, we were also able to fully implement electronic document review for our building permitting. We've been working on this for several years and we're able to go live just before the pandemic hit. I'm very thankful we were. We're up, last I saw, about 80% of our building permits are being reviewed paperless, fully electronic. So that's been good. There's been some growing pains, but we certainly didn't anticipate that type of utilization this quickly. COVID really changed the game in terms of permit review. And then the Housing and Neighborhood Development team and myself really took the lead on acquisition and development of the Nevada Cares campus. So 3 major projects, happy to say we were able to successfully complete in the last year. Moving forward, you're going to hear more about these initiatives at your strategic planning session and also at some review meetings we have scheduled for our long-range planning work program. The first major initiative and strategy involves updating our public service and facility plans. That's a master plan implementation measure, and it's also going to be recommended as one of our strategic planning priorities. Essentially what that does is identify current and necessary needs for public services to support a growing population. And then having those plans updated allows us to review our funding mechanisms and potentially augment funding mechanisms using tools like impact fees. We completed impact fee system for the police department, and similar things could be done to help with funding for parks, for fire services, et cetera. The second major initiative involves really phase 2 of the code update process. That involves looking at the zoning maps on a neighborhood scale basis and also reviewing our neighborhood scale zoning overlays. It was decided during the code update process that we weren't going to do parcel level rezoning as part of that broad initiative, but instead circle back to those issues. So that's going to be a key part of our recommended work program. And lastly, Acela, which is our software that we use for permitting, for licensing, and a number of other functions. We've had some long-standing challenges with the software where it's not being utilized to the full extent. And we're really struggling to generate the necessary reports and have accurate information to report out to the public and use for internal tracking. Partly as a result of the cautious spending and record rates of construction that we've seen, the Building Enterprise Fund has a very large surplus. There's been a lot of applications and not a lot of spending to deal with that. So the recommendation will be to significantly enhance the Acela program using Building Enterprise Fund dollars. Financial summary. I should note, this section of the presentation was updated. The initial distribution did not have the Building Enterprise section of the department addressed. So you got updated information yesterday. And this slide is one of those. We're looking at a year-over-year decrease in spending for the general fund. We're working to utilize building fund revenues to the greatest extent allowable. This is showing just under a 6% decline. Once factoring in the adjustments we made yesterday, we're really looking at more of a 4% decrease. But still working to do more with less has been an ongoing challenge. So in terms of our funding requests, most of these, I think about 85%, involve the Building Enterprise Fund and a suite of additions really to catch up to the workload that we've seen. Our performance has really suffered. due to the limiting staffing, just in terms of our building permit turnaround and our accuracy. So there's a suite of building fund expenditures and also some fee adjustments that have been reviewed twice by the Building Enterprise Committee and recommended for approval. We have that scheduled for council review in April for a meeting to really focus in on the Building Enterprise Fund and how to get the fund surplus back to the allowable number. Essentially, we have a surplus of roughly $8 million, and the law indicates that should not exceed roughly $5 million, so there's a corrective action plan. Outside of the enterprise fund, there's really just a couple targeted requests. That's, you see at the top priority is the Acela upgrade I mentioned. The next priority is a new senior planner. And that's to enhance our comprehensive planning project and be able to get to more of the projects that council has identified as priorities and wanting to get to. This team handles plan updates, ordinance amendments, area plans, things of that nature. We basically have one staff member assigned to that function, and this would add a second. It also includes a budget for noticing and printing related to these long-range planning initiatives, especially the neighborhood outreach that I mentioned. That will allow a more participatory plan development process that involves the public to a greater extent. Then we go into a suite of building fund staff enhancements. These are really to catch up to where we should be with all the cuts we did last year and not seeing the corresponding decline in development activity. So that involves several positions within the building division at various levels. One new building permit technician, those are the folks who are at the front counter accepting building permits, these days digitally, but we'll be back in person soon. A plans examiner, as the name implies, reviews the permit applications and typically has changes before approving those. A supervisor within the building division. A senior civil engineer. Our engineers, essentially we don't have any senior engineers. We have a manager and a couple associates and some technicians. This will help on several fronts. It will help with our succession planning. It will also free up some of the time from the building technicians who have been, the engineering technicians. They've been simply too busy reviewing building permits to follow up on programs like our basin inspection program and other matters. So one more staff in the engineering division. Similarly, one more staff in the planning division. Our assistant planners largely focus on building permit review. Again, just a very high volume of building permits. And then a reclass of our building and safety manager to be a deputy director. Our building and safety manager is supervising close to 40 people now, and comparable size communities have more of a deputy director position for that large of a team. And this will help us retain our top quality manager over time. And then some offices and equipment to support the additional staff. Down on number 11 is a position that's recommended to be split 50-50 between the general fund and the building enterprise fund. This would be a GIS analyst. We really don't have any GIS staff here on the team. We have various team members who have GIS expertise, but to do mapping related and mapping geographic type analyses, we're wholly dependent on the one GIS analyst in the IT department. So this would really help both with our long range planning initiatives moving forward, things like the Virginia Range Plan and other plans, but also better tracking our development and permitting activity, which I mentioned have been a real struggle. There's a GIS consultant, a small line item to clean up the old data, which is not very clean. And then scanning similarly to catch up on a backlog of document scan and records retention. So that's the suite of budget proposals that we've put forward. Again, what you see here is roughly 15% of our request is general fund, about $290,000, of which 90,000 is a one-time, and then the balance are under the building. I think I have a last slide that's a little different than the two prior departments, involving the fees. We have several categories of fees. The general fund fees, these two kind of work together. We have our business license fees and our community development, basically our planning application fees. Building license fees are a significant revenue generator for the city, I believe about $20 million each year. And the planning fees are not. They actually don't fully cover the cost of reviewing plans and applications. The idea when this was established, as I understand, is we wanted to be as friendly as possible to let businesses establish, and then the revenue would come over time as they successfully operate those businesses. In terms of the Building Enterprise Fund, part of the suite to get the balance back where it needs to be, and again, we'll go into this more at a special agenda item on a future council meeting, is to come up with a net 5% fee reduction. It's a little bit complex how the building fees work. Basically, there's a standardized valuation table that's used nationally that's showing a 7% increase in the cost of construction this year. We would balance that out by adjusting our multiplier to result in a net 5% fee reduction. It sounds a little odd proposing a fee reduction. That's not something we normally do. But the history of our building permit fund, there was a really massive increase in our valuation table where in 2018, they adjusted from 2006 rates all the way up to 2018 rates. So it was a 12-year adjustment done in one calendar year. And looking at the data, it appears that we're charging quite a bit. We're generating a surplus. And even with the additional expenditures that I've just outlined, we're still recommending, and the Building Enterprise Fund supported, doing a 5% building fee net reduction as part of that package. And I believe that concludes my short presentation. We're both here available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And you're both there, so we appreciate that. Great presentation. And we'll start off with Councilwoman Dewar. I know you're talking to us by phone. Are you interested in being the first to go this round?
I'd like to be the last, if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll go back to, I don't know if Councilman Delgado would like to ask questions because he could be the first. And if he doesn't pop up here, I don't see him. So we'll go back to Councilwoman Breckus. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. So my question is to our manager. I had asked over the weekend after my review, and I haven't seen it, but a list of all positions. When we close up the budget in May, I feel we have sat through all these presentations and we understand what each department looks like. But then sometimes mid-year, there's changes, positions upgraded, positions downgraded, sometimes new positions added. And I've always had a hard time with that because I feel when we do two things, we evaluate the manager and we set the budget. And if we set the budget and all of a sudden new positions jump in that we didn't have anything to do, it's like, well, where were we? And so I asked for a list from this last year, and I know we were in a lot of turmoil with losing a manager and interim, of all the positions. When we closed out the budget in May, how many positions were administratively changed in some way? Because I know there were several in this department. And when I hear a department say, I want a new director, and say they don't get a director, but then in July or October, someone comes before us and says, I'm the new director. And we go, whoa, how did that happen? So, Mr. Manager, I guess particularly for you, because you've been on 6 months and I haven't seen any new org charts changed. are we going to have some of those surprises, or I mean, where are you thinking? It's usual that particularly a new manager will do some org chart work. We haven't seen anything, and I feel like if in October or August you're going to change up the organization, I might just clock it in here.
Understand. The org chart changes that I'm looking at, you'll see during the strategic planning presentation in April. I would point you to the org charts that are included as part of your budget book for each department, but I will get you a list of all positions that have been administratively changed over the last, let's call it 18 months.
Okay, so today we could be hearing all these wants and things that when we make the hard decisions in May, but you think in April you're going to show refinements of what was in our book here today?
I think in April, I'm going to show you what it would look like if you approved things as we recommend. You would see what the
Those recommendations aren't in the book yet.
They are by and large, but you'll see sort of, you have a chart as it exists today, and the recommendations are presented earlier in, and it's unfortunate that we had the circumstance that we did yesterday in that, we're going a little bit out of order in terms of our presentation.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll hold for my second round.
Thank you. I think you asked good questions, and I think that if you're going to provide, Mr. Manager, the list of these changes to Councilwoman Breckus, I'm assuming you're going to have all the council members receive the same thing.
Of course.
Am I correct? Okay, and then second of all, it would be nice, and I was going to ask this early on, but if we can have a list of how these presentations are going to go, which departments, because it's a little hard at finding out at, the last minute that, and I don't know, maybe we have a list already, but it would be nice if we could, for the rest of this time frame, we could know who's going to be coming up next. So that would be helpful. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Arlo and Angela and everybody in the CD department. I mean, what a year to have such incredible development expansion during the midst of a pandemic when you all were asked to be pulled in so many different directions and still kept the boat afloat and kept things processing. I will tell you the improvements that I saw and heard, even amidst, is that a right word? Amidst? All of the growth that's going on and all the development projects and everything. I don't know that I heard from somebody bringing in a project that there was a problem with the expeditious manner of processing their project. And we always hear when something gets stuck somewhere and, goes into a black hole, that we had those issues in the past and people weren't getting communication. And I know you walk on the second floor and you think, well, my goodness, everything's going to be delayed because of the pandemic and the restrictions on the personnel. But I think actually that the opposite happened. I heard from folks saying they loved the process. They thought it was super efficient. And so kudos to the both of you and your departments for navigating during a pandemic in a way that really kept things, the good things that were clipping along, you kept them clipping along. So thank you very much for all your work on that. And of course, Arlo, you got pulled into the Nevada Cares campus and homeless realm in a manner that I can't imagine you had a single moment of which to breathe because you were consumed so much. I just know my meetings were probably 1/10 of yours and mine were incredible. So thank you for all of your involvement and your dedication to that, because none of that would have ever happened without you. So I really don't, other than to say, the needs that you have to continue the good work you're doing so you can all keep doing what you're doing and frankly, keep your sanity while you're at it. I think we need to find a way to continue to keep this well-oiled machine churning and not have you all suffer from mass burnout and get the right expertise in the right areas that you need. So kudos to both of you for doing a tremendous job this year.
Yes.
Thank you, Council Member, for those comments. I appreciate that. I'd be remiss to not say that, really the whole team has been working so hard. And, you know, Angela and I are visible. We're here on Zoom and TV and speak with council a lot, but we couldn't have done that really if all 75 people weren't, you know, frankly, putting in overtime to make it through this pandemic and keep everything moving. So we appreciate that support. And I just wanted to say that, you know, yes, we've had a busy year, but I know we're not alone. And, you know, we feel fortunate to not be one of the small businesses who've suffered more so. So being busy isn't the worst thing in the world.
Thank you, and greatly appreciated. We just appreciate the work that you've done in your department. So thanks so much to everyone. I'll go to Councilwoman Dewar if she is ready to ask her question. Questions?
I am ready. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much. So just making sure you can hear me fine.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I too want to add some compliments to start off with. I think all the way back to a year ago when COVID hit and the challenges we went through with our businesses and trying to roll out the COVID restrictions, be responsive, help people interpret what was meant, come up with new procedures. I was so impressed by that particular thing that you guys did. I mean, it just continued to roll. But I just wanted to call that out, coming up with the signs for people to put on their doors to say, hey, we are COVID compliant, all of that. There was so much on interpretation of our world in a new COVID world. So I too want to add my kudos to that. I do have a couple questions for the team. I'll start with the comment that we are making progress on the tree ordinance finally. And I say finally because I think we started maybe 5 years ago. And this year, in between everything, the team with Kelly now as part of the team, we're being able to, address that. And I'll be bringing this up later at Parks, but I do think it will require an additional tree technician, arborist specialist, whatever. So I just want to make a mark for that. I do expect we'll be mostly done with this rule adoption, by June, July, August, that time period. So just something to think about. I don't know where it fits. It probably fits wherever the arborist is, whether that's Parks, Public Works, or CD, but it's fine in Parks, and I'll bring it up there too. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that I wanted to really support a couple of the recommendations that Arlo made. I think it is very smart to add a civil engineer, senior engineer, because right now Michael Michelle is carrying that whole load. And while he's very modest and he says, I can do everything, but we know he can't. And he began a basin inspection program that I think was very effective, but I think he may have underestimated the time required. I serve on the BFAC, and he last said, hey, I'm not going to be able to continue this for the rest of the basins in our town, other than Swan Lake Basin and Silver Lake Basin.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, she dropped off.
Well, she's still there, but I don't know where she dropped off to.
The GIS request. I find it astonishing.
Councilwoman,
I'll just say this.
Councilwoman Dewar, I just want to interrupt you for a second. I'm going to let you go back and start because you dropped off and you were off for probably about a minute. So you need to start last comment.
My last comment was about supporting the senior engineer request.
Right.
And I was explaining how Michael Michelle has a heck of a lot on his shoulders and had started a stormwater inspection program, but to the BFAC, he told us recently he could not continue for the rest of the city. So I think it does need to continue for the rest of the city. We're doing so much building. We have to make sure that those stormwater systems are built appropriately. And so I think that whether it's housed here or over in John Flansburgh's department, it marries up with the stormwater program. It may be partially be able to pay for some of those fees, but regardless, I think it's an important add. And then lastly, I wanted to commend the recommendation on the GIS specialist, both parts, because I've never seen a city of this size have one GIS analyst to support the entire city. I would use a word like ridiculous. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but I mean, I find it confounding that our planning team, our public works team, our parks team would not have the mapping capability to help them do their job in this day and age. GIS came in the 80s. I know, I mean, my teams were developing those maps, and we are now, what, over 25 years later, at least, and we have one GIS person. I find that absolutely astonishing. So I couldn't support that request more. And there are other things that I support in this too. I'll stop, I'll do for round 2 and possibly round 3. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
If I
Okay.
could respond to one of Councilwoman Doerr's points.
Please do.
On the tree inspector, we discussed that as a team, and it's not part of our budget proposal here. We're recommending that we look at the staffing needs in conjunction with that tree ordinance and kind of determine how much that's going to involve, and look at that as an addition, likely through the building fund in conjunction with those ordinances.
I agree with that.
On the basin inspection, I think what we underestimated was regular development activity. The basin inspection program is about as intensive as it was anticipated to be, but we just had way more development than we expected a year ago. So the basin inspections fell by the wayside in order to keep up with development in general. And this position will allow us to resume that work.
Right. And one final thought on that, and maybe we already do this, but we could require an as-built stamped by a PE, which we may already do. But the idea is making sure that it was built to our plans and that we're comfortable with it, because so much is riding on it. The whole flooding, the stormwater, how everything works is very dependent on making sure the thing is built as it was anticipated. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on. We'll go back to, I don't see anyone else. Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going into, our strategic plan here pretty soon, and we'll get to it. But I feel that all the good work that we put into the Reno master plan has gone toward it sitting on the shelf, with the exception of the box being checked on the zoning code, which, frankly, was about 75% of what I was hoping for. And I think that's no one's fault except for the council, probably. And that's why I'm asking for organizational change, because I do not believe in a high growth city that you can implement a master plan in the same department that you can process a heck of a lot of development. It always loses focus and attention and resources. And that's why I'm kind of, looking to see what's next. And I think that's unfortunate, because what we've done instead of implementing the master plan is we're happy to do planning at the planning commission with very hostile extended hearings on development requests that are increasingly moving into litigation. And so if you upstream it into policy planning that is meaningful, you probably won't have such uncertainty out there in neighborhoods and to the development processes. So that's my view. And I really don't think Reno has the culture of being able to do policy planning in the same function where you're doing development planning. And I've been saying that to 2 city managers now. But the question really to me, because I did notice the request to drop the fees is, and I've brought this up twice at council so far, is why aren't, I just heard we have a huge overrun or surplus in the building enterprise fund. I've just also heard that we don't have 2 fire stations. Why aren't we hooking our, our proverbial wagon to what they're doing in Clark County, where they're trying to use their surplus in their building fee to build fire stations? Seems like a no-brainer to me. Mr. Manager,
that's not currently legally allowable. If that bill passes, that would definitely be something we'd be exploring. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to maximize the use of the building fund for permissible uses. But the building fund is funded only with building permits. our planning applications come into the general fund. So there are some constraints on how much general work can be done under the building fund, but you saw in the budget request, the bulk of the funding request does come out of that building fund.
Yeah, I've been on since 2012 and I've seen the fund go up and I've seen the numbers rebalance and all, but it seems like a permanent solution needs, and that bill, if it's passed as proposed, it's not going to do any good to us because it doesn't go to our geography, our county geography. So I don't know, you know, we don't have a fire station. Someone's trying to get a fire station with their building fund. We have the same issue. It just seems like so obvious to me. I don't understand why it's not a legislative priority when fiscal sustainability is our priority. Maybe Mr. Shaver can answer some of this.
If I may, thank you, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor. For the record, Dylan Shaver, Chief of Staff to the City Manager. Ms. Wilsey, our legislative advocate, has been working with the sponsors of those bills, as she mentioned last week, to try and find a way to allow the bill to sort of more broadly apply to other jurisdictions. Right now, it does not, but that remains part of the work down in Carson City. We, as an organization, do not have the authority to unilaterally amend bills. That requires the action, obviously, of the legislature, and we will continue to update the council as that progresses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again. Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. I just think it's important that we acknowledge the good professional work that went into the master plan. That was a group of professionals that dedicated their time with our community to develop that incredible plan. And frankly, I thought the prior comments were insulting to the work that's been done. I don't think it was somehow shorted because we were doing it by our professionals. I thought it was a great process, and kudos to all of us that worked on that.
I agree with you as well. Councilwoman Dewar.
Thank you so much. My next topic is the development of the plan, the area plans that need to go with the new master plan. And I see Arlo already shaking his head, but we heard our mayor say at our last meeting, approving no more permits, at least from her perspective. We don't have a moratorium, but no more yes votes on permits down in South Reno until we get this Virginia Range corridor, which is critical, to the whole South Reno. And we continue to have more properties down there that want to get annexed in and get developed. It's happening as we speak. So I wonder, in this budget, have you thought about how you want to address that? And I know I'm not the only one, right? So I know that out at Verdi, there's been discussion of trying to interpret better the Morton's and Garson, even though we probably had the last development just get approved, or the last big one. And then up in North Valleys, I mean, everybody needs some kind of a focus. I desperately need it, and more too in the South Reno, because we've hit it. Unless we have the entire Sunny Hills, 20,000 acres that wants to come in, the whole Bella Vista, other projects, land that we haven't even never talked about and doesn't have a name. So what's your thought on that, Mr. Stockham?
Great question. We're working up a staff report right now, which is tentatively going to be on your April 28th agenda, to go through those specific work programs and those programs that are required, those additional ones that council has already initiated or indicated support to do, and then what else we can take on. So we're planning to have a detailed discussion with council of all of those projects at a future meeting. How it looks in terms of our budget proposal today is the senior planner that's being requested, as well as the GIS analyst, would allow us to complete more of those initiatives.
Okay.
That would nearly double the staff we have available for comprehensive. Right.
So I have a recommendation to complement that. The group that you brought in to help us with the whole master plan, they were a specialist in this field. Mm-hmm. And I have to believe that they, or somebody like them, is a specialist in narrowing down and looking at area plan, maybe under the guidance and direction of one of our senior planners. This is what I would recommend, because they can bring a variety of members in, they can hold public workshops, that burden would not be on our staff, and they could work under the direction of our staff and get it done. And then it's not like a negative on your mark where you're carrying it on your back going, we still don't have this done, we still don't have this done. So my recommendation is to do that, is to get a consultant to help you do it, crank it out, work with the publics down there. I will commit as much time, I will pledge to you whatever time it takes to convene meetings, you know, with the residents down in Ward 2, whatever it takes. We just need to get it done, because otherwise development will be completely stalled. You know, the last development we did, which as everyone knows, I didn't support. The reason I did not support it was because it basically, if you had a road and you suddenly had a parked car sideways in the road and you could not go any further, that's what I feel like we did, is that there's no animal migration ability. There's there's people challenges, there's animal challenges, there's wildlife challenges. It doesn't matter that it's just one project. It just plugged up the whole road. So until we get the road figured out, the corridor, whether maybe it's multiple corridors, you know, east side, west side, I don't know what that looks like, but whatever it is, we have to be working with Washoe County, Story County, and the city. You know, it's going to be a little bit complicated. And I think you as a team have worked so hard that you need some resources to help with that. So for our next review, I would like you to look into that, find out what that would take, what kind of a consulting contract that would, and they could go from different parts of the city and just get these things done. Okay, so that's my suggestion for this round. Thank you.
If I could just briefly comment on that, we gave that approach pretty serious consideration. There's pros and cons of use of consultants. The con is it tends to be much more expensive than staff time. And also you don't build up as much staff expertise. The pro is that you often are able to bring in people who have a very high level of expertise and can focus on that project and getting it done. So there are some benefits. We didn't put that in our initial recommendations, really because of the overall fiscal constraints of the city. We listen, we've heard how hard it is. The decisions on funding are hard. A consulting contract, having been a consultant in the past doing that type of work, you know, it would probably push up towards $100,000 for that project, certainly over 50. So
I don't think that's unreasonable.
The pro and con that council would need to weigh.
But at least it would be done for the next 20 years and you could take it off your plate. Maybe there's some grant funding.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
We'll go to one more round, and we have to remember the time, and we have another hour. So we have to get in as many as we can, but I think there might be the willingness or the opportunities for us to go one more round on this. So Councilwoman Jordan, did you have anything else? Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Breckus.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? I thought we were closing at 4. We are going to 5 till 5.
Right.
Okay. I just want to say, because I think I was misunderstood by my two colleagues, Ms. Jordan and Ms. Weber. I was not in any way maligning the work on the master plan. The master plan is a very good product. What I was stating, and I think it's important, and it was really illustrated by Ms. Stewart's concerns, is if you look to chapter 5 of the master plan, we have something called the implementation plan. So a lot of times plans will get done. It's kind of a proverbial statement, and they'll be put on the shelf to collect dust. That's because implementation falls off. I believe, to no one's fault, implementation has fallen off on the master plan in a tremendous way. And I think in lieu of doing that work, we have relied more upon planning to be the development world, where we have these very contentious hearings, many going to litigation. And I think a lot of that could have been stopped if we had immediately, when we adopted the plan, start doing more implementation that Ms. Stewart's talking about. So those are my comments. I wasn't in any way maligning the master plan. I'm very proud of the master plan accomplishment that we did. And a little bit of implementation that we've done, most significantly this zoning code. So thanks for allowing me that clarification.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go lastly to you, Councilwoman Dorr, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And I was thinking a moment ago that maybe a better analogy wouldn't have been a road with a car sideways, but maybe the Suez Canal. Okay, with the boat turned sideways. That was me. The project was the boat, and people can't get around. And so until we get that straightened out, which took a lot of doing at the Suez Canal and is still underway, you know, things grind to a halt. And that's where we basically are, if that analogy maybe is more current. My last point that I wanted to make is that for the last 6 years, I have asked for 2 positions for your department, and neither of which have been identified in this proposed budget. One of those is a person to do historical analysis. In the last 6 years, we've probably lost, I would say, somewhere in the order of 20 or more, 25 to 30 historic homes in our community, because we really haven't had the ability to support and staff our Historic Resources Commission. We haven't had the personnel to analyze these things, to work with communities, to set up historic districts. You know, we have 2 historic districts, as I recall. So that's one thing I think we're lacking, and I'd love to address it. My recommendation has been to get a part-time person on contract. You just said contracts are expensive, but I don't think it's that level of expensive. I think there are historians out there that would be happy to work with us and consult with us. Take that burden off Jeff Burkhardt or whoever's doing it now. Number 2 is we long ago, so we used to have this person, just so those who are newer don't know, we had a person. We also had a landscape architect in your department. That landscape architect would work with all these developers. It's not just about trees, it's bushes, irrigation, layout, design, everything. And I know that we have a person who is skilled in that, but that person, Brooke Oswald, is extremely busy. He's like on every project in Ward 2. So I think it's a whole capacity that we're missing for the city as the city grows in this incredible way. So it's some things that to think about: contracting local services, landscape architecture, historic resources to supplement and help your team so that you don't put those burdens on existing staff. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add one quick thing that I just came across today. And I would like to see us look into some kind of a landscaping code enforcement officer for the requirements that we put on our community in their businesses and what have you. And then 2 years down the road, no one's looking at the landscaping and how it's been left. And it makes us look like we don't care about, you know, asking for certain kinds of landscaping, and then nobody goes back and checks it out with our businesses and what have you. So I don't know I don't know what the title of the person is. I know the city of Reno used to have that person, and I can't even remember what her name was. So I don't know.
I think it's kind of what I was getting at, whether it's up front or back end. Just like the stormwater basins, we need to.
Well,
Correct.
and
That's the position that Councilwoman Doerr was suggesting, and that our recommendation is we look at that staffing need in conjunction with the tree protection ordinance and do a little analysis of, you know, is it a full-time position, just what it is and at what level. In the past, it was a licensed landscape architect who did that work. That position got cut during the recession and it has not been recreated. So there's definitely a need there. It's just an issue of prioritizing a limited pool of funds. But we do believe that that function can be done through the Building Enterprise Fund.
okay, because it just seems to me that it wouldn't be called a landscaping architect, but it would be more under the code enforcement and people keeping up, you know, if they're watering too much, if they're not supposed to be watering, you know, whatever. So it seems to me it would be more code enforcement and bringing people into compliance of so that's my 2 cents. But thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's really important. So with that, I believe we're ready to move on. And thank you both so much for all that you do and for your departments, keeping them running and smoothly. And great job. So thank you. Madam Clerk, who will be our next?
Madam Mayor, at this time, next up is going to be Jamie Schroeder, Director of Parks and Recreation. We'll move her over for her to be able to do her version of the PowerPoint at this time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Schroeder.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
I am good, thank I'll share my screen. All right. My hope is that everyone can see that.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Rearrange our monitor here. Okay. Okay, so before you is our department org chart for the Parks and Recreation Department. I kind of group us into 3 different areas. We've got the administrative division, which has 6 full-time employees responsible for department-wide business functions to include things such as our administrative support, personnel, payroll, accounting, budget development, financial management, and strategic planning. And then we've got our parks and urban forestry divisions, 31 full-time employees to do park maintenance and 4 full-time employees to do the urban forestry. Our horticulturist position remains vacant at this time. Those 35 folks are responsible for 87 parks, 722 developed acres, 19 school sites, 56 restrooms, 50 shelters, those are the picnic shelters, 80 play structures, 36 miles of trail, 2,100 acres of open space, 24,000 trees, and 1 nature study area, which is the Oxbow. Then on the other side of the department, we have 3 recreation divisions that have 35 full-time equivalents, and they're responsible for all the programs, registration, and customer service for 6 recreation centers, 5 ball fields, 4 pools, 22 school sites, and then we also oversee agreements for the Reno Tennis Center, which has 14 tennis courts, 8 pickleball courts, 1 ski hill, and our newest nature study area, thanks to the approval of the Rosewood long-term lease agreement. So even though it shows that we have 76 full-time equivalents, our department is also greatly dependent upon and supplemented by up to 350 temporary part-time staff. They are the lifeblood of our department, and that number will fluctuate depending on time of year. So prior to the pandemic, at last count, we served over 137,000 people in our recreation programs. We don't actually have the ability to count how many people use our parks, but we definitely are an integral part of our community and our quality of life. So that team of 76 folks focus on these departmental core services. So there are 9 categories of core services between the Parks, Recreation, and Administrative divisions. And each one of these program areas that you see here really focus on the 3 nationally accepted pillars of service for Parks and Recreation departments, which is the social equity piece, health and wellness, and conservation. Top accomplishments for this last fiscal year, with much gratitude to our Public Works Capital Projects team, we were able to complete 7 significant construction projects. That includes Cyan Park Phase 2, which if you have not seen it yet, please check it out. Then we have an inclusive playground, basketball court, tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts, a very large 340 by 440 foot turf field that will accommodate different flat field sports. That's surrounded by a walking path and fitness stations. There are a couple of picnic shelters there and our newest dog park, parking and landscaping. The next project that we completed was Mayor's Park Phase 2, in which we added a restroom facility. We paved the entry drive and parking lots up to the ball fields. We renovated a ball field, and then we did some much needed drainage improvements in that area. Additionally, at Mayor's Park, we were able to construct an 18-hole disc golf course, which the local disc golf course players group has stated that they think it is a very fantastic addition. It's challenging but fun, and so we're really excited to see that come to fruition. Idlewild Playground has been recently completed, which is a large play structure with 2 towers. It's quite phenomenal to see on the height, and it's got multiple slides coming out of it. Instead of your traditional swing set, we did zip line style swing. So it's quite fun to Zoom back and forth on that. And then we will be adding in May, when temperatures allow, a new merry-go-round that is wheelchair accessible. So that's going to be pretty amazing to see that get put into play as well. At Huffaker Park, we renovated 2 tennis courts and 1 basketball court. At Reno Tennis Center, we converted 2 tennis courts into 8 pickleball courts. And then the last project that Public Works helped us with was converting our chemical systems at all 4 pools from a liquid-based system to an on-demand tablet system, which is far safer and far more effective than traditional. The other accomplishment that you see here really is, this is where I get to brag about your Parks and Recreation employees. I think that the team has done an amazing job going into a pandemic. There's no playbook on how we all needed to continue providing services to the community. And so our team did an amazing job with reading through the guidelines and figuring out how we could offer programs. Our park side of the house, they never got to work from home remotely. Our parks aren't something that we were able to close. They're not fenced in. And so our crews did an amazing job with the explosive use of people using our parks. So we successfully were able to maintain and manage those parks. And then on the recreation side, provide safely with no super spreader events, over 27 different programs in our rec centers, as well as including, offering the vacation station in our Sierra Kids programs. So kudos to our team for being able to manage to safely provide all of that, the programming. And then I wanted to give a shout out to the fire department for making sure that our team got vaccinated so that we could protect them as they were offering those services. The last top accomplishment would be, we did some multiple service provision efficiencies and restructuring of our department. We created the Health and Wellness Division. We implemented some fee increases to be able to address the mandatory minimum wage increases. And we were able to work together with the Civil Service and Human Resource departments to create 2 new categories of part-time employees that greatly help with our year-round operations. So we now have a non-career path employee category that allows employees to work up to 1,039 hours in a year. And then we have the ability to hire 15-year-olds. And so we focus for 15-year-olds, we will hire them in our youth programs as well as our aquatics for lifeguards. Very huge changes to help us be more efficient with our operations. So thank you to both of those departments for working with us on that. Our major initiatives and strategies for next fiscal year would be the first one, fundraise 10 million to reconstruct Moana Pool. And I know this council will hear about the funding plan that the finance team has done a fantastic job of putting together for council review later. We are working on updating the 2008 recreation facilities plan. That plan was adopted by council, but then we went straight into the recession. So unfortunately, we weren't able to implement very much of that plan. And so now we're looking to create a more robust parks, recreation, and open space service plan. And so we're kind of abbreviating that as the PROS service plan. And so that is a component of the larger master plan. And so we are able to put some time and effort and staffing towards getting that plan updated. Then the last thing we're going to be focused on for next fiscal year will be completing the CDBG improvements at Paradise Park and Uri Park. Just as a reminder, the Paradise Park improvement is the futsal courts, those mini pitch courts. So those should be installed by the end of June. And then next fiscal year, we're looking at funding to do new entry gates for the parking lots of Paradise Park, and then a new roof on the activity center that is located in that park. For Uri Park, that's more specific to this fiscal year, and we're looking at installing some fencing at the front end of that park. So that should make that park a little bit safer, and we're hoping to have that installed by the end of June. So I'm going to switch gears to the annual fee schedule for a little bit. For historical reference, this council will recall that the state had created a mandatory minimum wage increase of 75 cents per year for 5 years until minimum wage reached $12. And so last year, council spent quite a bit of time discussing with us how we would address the increased minimum wage and the increased temporary salaries that go with that. And so we had come up with a 5-year graduated cost recovery plan in which that would basically take, and we would gradually increase our fees to keep pace with the minimum wage increases each year. And so last year's fee schedule that was adopted by council had those fee increases. Council had concerns about our most vulnerable population. And so in order to make sure that they still had access to our recreation amenities, we created the Health and Wellness Division by combining our Seniors Division and our Recreation Centers Division, which allowed us to create a Health and Wellness Pass that now is automatically given to any Reno resident that qualifies for a scholarship. That pass combines the Senior Activity Pass, the Rec Center Pass, and the Aquatics Pass for all the drop-in activities, which then means that even though we've had to increase our fees, it still allows them to be able to participate in our basic recreational services. We moved pickleball into an open gym pricing structure, and then we increased the senior age to 60. So as a reminder, we are now heading into year 2 of the minimum wage increase. So effective July 1st of 2021, our minimum wage will need to be $9.75 an hour. And we will continue to have to increase our fees until July 1 of 2024. That works out to roughly $180,000 of an increase each year. And so if we did nothing over the next 5 years, our total deficit would be about $2.7 million, which would be equivalent to either 16 firefighters or 17 police officers. And so it was important to bring that fee increase to council. So what we're doing for what we're going to be recommending to council for this budget cycle is to continue to do those gradual fee increases. And so this slide just has an example. You'll recall when you see the fee schedule, it's roughly 500 lines. So that's something that's very difficult to put into a PowerPoint. So I just pulled a couple of examples to show council of what we're looking to do, which is again, a continuation of what we recommended last year. We are still trying to simplify our fee schedule. And so you'll notice that there's a bit of a difference between pools and rec centers. And by doing our tiered approach over the next 5 years, we'll eventually just have the same entry fee admission cost, whether you're going to a pool or a rec center, which I think is just far more customer friendly, as well as it's far easier to administrate. So for pool lanes, you'll see about an increase of 25 cents per hour per lane each year. With adult sports, we're continuing with a $5 or $10 increase each year, which keeps pace with the market rate and what City of Sparks offers. And then just based on programs that will be allowed, brunch and a movie is an example of where, depending on what those movie tickets will be, if we can go back to movie theaters, we'll adjust accordingly. But it could roughly be about 50 cents a year. And then lastly, the Sierra Kids program, this is an example. We have a few fees for Sierra Kids, but the afternoon weekly rate is kind of the most popular rate. And that increase is still on target to just be $1.50 a week per year. So for this upcoming fee schedule in February, I gave a brief update on the current Parks and Recreation operations to the Washoe County Senior Citizen Advisory Board and let them know that our city council would be discussing the fee schedule as well as our Recreation and Park Commission. And so we invited them to the Rec and Park Commission meetings so that they would be able to participate via public comment. We also made sure that the Reno Senior Citizen Advisory Committee members were aware that we would be talking about the fee schedule at the Rec and Park Commission. So they were emailed the agendas for the February and March meetings. And at the March meeting, our Rec and Park Commission recommended that council continue to do the incremental fee increases per the graduated cost recovery plan. And then now going back to the general budget for Parks and Recreation, this slide is our financial summary. Overall, our budget remains pretty stable. With a new budget strategy, we did decrease our services and supplies by about 2%, which is roughly $54,000. And nearly half of that decrease was eliminating some outside services contracts because we feel that we can do it better and more efficiently by bringing it in-house on our recreation side. For our additional funding requests, our number one priority is our park maintenance side. Our park staffing are at 1991 levels. The recession, we took a pretty big hit in that area. So our staffing has gone down, but we've continued to expand our parks and our trails and even street landscaping that we've had to take under our purview. And so to put it into perspective, our park maintenance workers, that the number that we have, they're on average responsible for almost 7 parks each, which is roughly 75 acres to care for. And what they do is general park maintenance. So daily, they make sure that they hit all of the trash cans and pick up the litter that's blowing around, clean the restrooms, pruning, planting, fertilization, maintenance on playgrounds, picnic shelters, and trails. So for the strategic investment that the finance team and the city manager are recommending, you will see that the parks maintenance worker is one that city manager Thornley is recommending. And is something that we would be incredibly grateful to see. So these would be 2 park maintenance worker 1 positions, and they would be focused on the highly visible tasks such as the janitorial duties. So they would be focused mostly on ensuring that our restrooms are clean and the trash cans are emptied and that the litter is taken care of. Next on the list are tree maintenance workers. So our back before the recession, we used to have double the amount of tree maintenance workers. So we would have 2 more that we would request that get added. And then the third line, we were actually able to implement that through a revenue offset. And so that really is no longer a need based on the additional funding requests that you see here. The fourth one, our team in youth has done an amazing job capitalizing on this new technology for behavior management. And so this request would be to continue that technology subscription fee, as well as purchase those incentive prizes for our kids and our Sierra Kids and Youth Vacation Station programs. Number 5 would be a bonus program that we would do, which really would help with staff retention. Even though we are able to raise the minimum wage rates that we pay our employees, we're still far below what the private sector is able to pay their employees. And so this helps us remain competitive. Number 6 is a park planner position. That position was eliminated in the recession, and the parks manager at the time was able to take on that work, but really it should be back to its own position, because the park planner is responsible for reviewing new developments, administering the residential construction tax, planning out park projects. Number 7 is an adaptive recreation specialist. And so what we would do would take some part-time temporary salary funding that we have and put that towards going to a full-time employee. And that would allow us to expand our pretty successful adaptive recreation programs. And then lastly on here, you'll see a recreation supervisor position. So that position would be in our health and wellness division. And right now the recreation manager is handling the workload of a supervisor. And so adding the supervisor position allows us to succession plan, but it also would then allow us to have better quality control over our recreation facilities and programming. And with that, I will bring back if I stop sharing.
Thank you so much. Great job. Let's go to Councilwoman Dewar. You get to be first.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. Great job, Jamie, as always. So understandable. I love how you added at the last slide, you circled manager recommends, which is basically what we've been asking for is, what are you asking for? What is the manager recommending at this point? You know, that could change over time. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I had enough time, so I jumped in and did it.
Oh, you jumped in and did it. Okay, cool. So of course, I was very sad to see that the manager did not recommend some additional tree trimming and tree maintenance people. And so I'm going to continue advocating for those. That's before we even adopt our new tree ordinance. So I know how hard that team works. They're all over the city. You mentioned we have 24,000 trees. And how do we know that? Because we've inventoried them all on what? A GIS platform. So we know where they are, who they are, how they're doing, and all of that. My first comment to you is going to be, of course, to support the Moana Pool request. Not surprising. The Moana Pool happens to be located in Ward 2, but it is a city resource. With the loss of the Lake Ridge Tennis Club and pool, 2 pools, one indoor, one outdoor, many people think, well, that was just a private pool, but no, they gave scholarships to many swimmers across our city to allow them to swim. And it looks like we've received, I don't know, 50 letters. I haven't been able to count them up. Maybe there's more, 100. Very big surprise to me, but they have made it known to us that they want a pool. So I'm so glad that you and our city manager are working on a plan to help finance that. I think it's probably a good time to announce too, that I have been successful in obtaining at least $250,000 of private funds from our various community partners. And I think we'll be able to continue to supplement that. And that's in addition to the amazing $9 million Pennington Fund. So these are private businesses, not nonprofits, that want to supplement this great charitable organization. So as you know, whatever I can do, finally on the pool, and I'm sure we'll have a couple more rounds. I know there's been a debate about what size this pool should be. I think we should debate no longer. I think that we need to go with that 50-meter pool. I know it's been back and forth, 35-meter, 50-meter, but many of the people that want this pool are swim team members. We have Olympic champions that are from Reno, Nevada with no pools. We have people even today that just got selected, my understanding, for either the Olympic tryouts or the Olympic team. And I'm not really sure which, so I don't want to say, but I know they're Olympic quality. So I just want to say that I think if we're going to do it, this is my theory and everything. If you're going to buy the table, buy a table that's going to last. You're going to build an aquatic center, build one that's going to meet the need. Don't short yourself. So I will just say, I'm not sure 18 million is the right number, the 9 million and the 9 million. It could be 20 million, whatever it is, to get to the right size of pool and all the amenities that are needed. We're not going to be doing this twice. So thank you for this round, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you so much.
Madam Vice Mayor, if I could just real quick, I just want to make sure, so City Manager Thornley did recommend 1 park maintenance worker and 1 tree maintenance worker. But in talking with our urban forester, the safety requirements for our tree workers, they really should be hired in pairs. And so that's why we had actually asked to recommend 2 park maintenance workers. And then, we know that we need more tree maintenance workers, but we want to be able to hire them in a pair.
Well, and maybe you'll be able to work with the Building Enterprise Fund, as we've discussed earlier in the earlier part of the program.
Yeah, perfect. Councilwoman Breckus, and then we'll go to Councilwoman Jordan.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Parks is always the hardest budget for me. I think it's, budgets are reflections of your values. Sometimes I think we short what I think are our values when it comes to the parks budget. And I guess my first question is, what position did you say was vacant?
The horticulturist position is vacant.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that, because when we had the budget last year, it was in there, but I guess we had a departure. Number 2 is, if you are under design on the Yori fence design, could you have a conversation with me about that? I worked with your predecessor on that, and I just kind of want to understand, along with some of the neighbors in that area.
Sure.
Number 2 is, I too support the pool and the larger size. I think it'd be folly to not do that. But I know we're going to talk about that later. I noticed in the materials that you're recommending we do the roofing at Sky Tavern. Is that true?
So the CDBG improvements that I had mentioned earlier was the roof at Paradise Park Activity Center.
Not Sky Tavern.
No.
Okay. I guess I saw that wrong. I'll be interested as the CARES Act money comes in to see how we can use that for some improvements, but I guess that's not before us right now. The one is, and this may be a deal breaker for me, this budget. I've always supported the budgets when we wrap them up, but in 2012, I wanted to bring an accelerated minimum wage. I mean, you say they're the part-time workers or the non-permanent are the lifeblood of the department, but still we've got them down at the very bottom minimum wage. And I've heard from your two predecessors that accelerating their wage will give us a better delivery of services because we'll have a better workforce. And I put that myself ahead of park maintenance workers at this time. I use the facilities and I'm very uncomfortable, and I'm out at the parks seeing the temporaries working what I believe is a substandard wage. And I've been strong on that for a long time, and I just cannot, this may be the year where I cannot continue to see it. And I can't continue to see it on the backs of our recreation users too. We don't ask other general fund departments to go find their revenue sources. And I was very uncomfortable last year with the accelerated wage thing we did, to kind of pass that along. So this is a real problem for me on the budget. And I may need to see these wages go up to at least the 24 under the Nevada minimum wage to feel comfortable closing up this budget. I'm just throwing it out there. And I've mentioned it, I think, every year. We put our heads together one year and then it dropped off, and this may be the year for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Breckus. Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. And it'd be good to just kind of have a summary of how many folks are at that lowest level. Like how many are we talking about? One of the comments, we're always, asking how to get more funding for all these areas. I do think the park maintenance positions are critical and something I think we need to aggressively pursue. And one of the things I heard from the Owners Association out here in Somerset with regards to West Park was that they were interested in the HOA taking over the maintenance of that park, which I don't know if that made it to your ears yet, Jamie, or not, but I certainly think that's something we should be, looking at. I don't know what pitfalls there might be, but of course they want to have larger control and expediting improvements or changes and that sort of thing. And when they mentioned that, of course, I didn't just jump up and down and say, of course. But that's something I think wherever there is an HOA that is interested in that, I think we should be looking at trying to get some of those parks off of our rolls if they can be adequately maintained. So I just am putting that out there as an opportunity to maybe expedite, if it makes sense, the transition of the maintenance of that park to that HOA.
Absolutely, yes. Out of the 87 parks, 6 of them are operated and maintained by the HOAs. And so the previous parks manager had done a really good job of making sure that we had park development agreements in place so that even though it was operated or maintained by the HOA, they still remained open to the general public. So thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to weigh in now if there isn't anybody else, and I don't see anybody raising their hands. So I'm going to weigh in on this round. And I appreciate all the work you do, Jamie, and your whole department, but they need to have a leader, and they have a great leader in you. And I just, I appreciate working with you and being the liaison for rec and parks. And so I want to share that with you. I think I need to put on the record that I believe totally in the maintenance of our parks, our assets. And I think that sometimes we forget about that in wanting to do bigger and better things at the parks that we have. So I have, as you know, I always am concerned about our maintenance at our parks. We do the best that we can do with what we have. And I really do hope that somewhere down the road that we can work with Washoe County on in areas where we both are sharing maintenance issues. For example, in the North Valleys, we know that we have a regional park, we have other parks in the area, and we also have a maintenance yard out here. So I think it's really important that we look at how we can work with Washoe County in this area. So that being said, we have in our community, we have older parks that need lots of work, and we know that. But instead, we always seem to be looking for more parks. And I do believe that we do need more parks, but we need our maintenance on the current parks, and we need our infrastructure and our parks updated and brought into usability in some cases. And so I just really want to talk about that at some point in time. This is our budget cycle. We have to remember that we have a flat budget. And so let's remember that when we are actually voting on this, because we do need to have that wage increase as you're working on. And I understand what Councilwoman Breckus is talking about, that she would like that to be. But I think that what you've done and your department has really worked hard on this wage increase, and it's in the best interest of our users and your department to get there this way through this budget cycle, as well as you started last year. So I think those are all important. And I just want to say, you do the job. I look at the Dorothy McAlinden Park and then the Mayor's Park and all the great things that have happened there over the last year. But we also have to remember that always we should be looking at what we can do with the parks that we have, in my opinion, and bring those up to date and be able to have maintenance on these resources that we have. And we really need to have our folks in the maintenance department really be a part of the whole process. And we need more of those, in my opinion. So there we go. And we'll go back to, I think, Councilwoman Breckus, were you first at this? This is your second round, right?
Yeah, I mean, I also very much value the maintenance, but you can't have it both ways. You cannot be bringing on new neighborhoods, particularly in sprawl land use patterns, and expect to have people moving out to new communities without parks. So that's why timing your growth very sequential is so important, because I just don't think that we can. And I live and I represent Ward 1 that has the oldest neighborhoods and the most park resources. And I very much do believe when the commitment is made to allow the expanded regional footprint, you have to bring the parks there. And the measures, unfortunately, has been the HOA arrangements, and not everyone wants to live in an HOA, and we haven't figured out how to design communities without that. And also, as we're seeing the great infill, you're going to need, and the infill is people not having yards, so their public spaces become so much more important than their private spaces because they don't have private spaces. So it is a tough one. It's a reflection of our values, and our values are that we really don't have a lot of resources in Nevada to fund our local government operations. But I'll just say, good job. Your team's good. And I am going to really stand on seeing that wage accelerated even more. I don't hear a lot of, I haven't been in the parks a lot recently in the COVID time to see what your workforce is, doing, but did you lose a lot of people? Are you down? Are you having a hard time attracting people in that temporary group now?
At first it was a challenge just because I think there was a lot of general apprehension. We are a forward-facing department and our programs involve interacting with other people. But after, you'll recall that we had to do a temporary layoff when we were doing the complete shutdown. But it's quite amazing to see that, at first it was slow being able to get people to come back, but I would say that we had 90% of our temp staff ended up coming back, which is quite amazing. So I think it's a testament to the culture that we've created that, it's a good place to work.
Yeah, but with that, I mean, I think these people are very passionate about recreation, but I don't want them taken advantage of. That's what I feel is going on when I can see them go to any retail operation and make more. And also, some of them are dealing with vulnerable populations too.
Thank you, Councilwoman Breckus. Appreciate it. And Councilwoman Dewar, I am so sorry. You were supposed to be next, so now you are.
It's fine. So Jamie, I'm going to cut right to the chase. So I'm so pleased that you're working on this open space plan. I mean, it's critical if we're to move forward and succeed with this ballot initiative. And why do we need this so bad? You have already pointed out all of your many needs. The fact that you're funding the staffing is less than it was 30 years ago. Less. I mean, to Councilman Breckus's point, are you shortages? Yes. Our city has doubled in size and our parks department staff is less. I mean, it's inconceivable, except that we experience some of the same things in our police department. So we need to get these addressed. And I'm putting a lot of hope on the ballot initiative. And if there are folks listening, especially all of those pool folks who have just suddenly come to the fore and written us, I hope they will write our state legislature and support our ballot initiative. And for those who don't know, we have to ask the legislature for permission to ask the people if they want to fund parks and recreation more. And that's all there is to it. And it would go on the ballot. It would be on the ballot in 2022. There's no foregone conclusions here. If they don't want to support it, they don't support it. If they do want to support it, they do support it. Because even if we build a pool, fingers crossed, we still have to operate a pool. Well, last time I saw it, the pool was going to cost like $300,000 to operate. I bet by the time it's built, it'll cost $400,000 to operate a year. And so we have to be able to have those funds to operate this brand new facility if we get it. Where are we getting those funds? Well, if this ballot initiative allows us to form a committee to analyze the problem based on your planning and then go to the voters to ask them, do you want to support this or not? We have a chance of not only building the pool, but operating the pool. In addition to operating the pool, one of the things that one of my other colleagues spoke about was the pressure that pandemic has put on people's desire to be outdoors, because they're so able to be outdoors and do so many more things than indoors. It's a lot less risky. It's very healthy. And so I want to encourage that when you're putting that open space plan or the parks plan, I think you called it, you had an acronym here. PROS plan together. I hope that you will visit with each council member on Zoom, whatever, and ask us what our priorities are for that plan. And make sure that we're part of your planning, because your guys are very good at getting community input, but it's more difficult to meet with the 7 of us and find out what our input is. And I will just tell you, one of the things that I care about, I've already brought it up, is at that intersection where city meets county. That's where a lot of our growth pressures are, whether it's out in Verdi, Virginia Range, North Valleys, Peavine, and that's where city and county meet. And that's where there's opportunities for open space. And if we do not figure out a way, last time I called it the sphere, but my colleague, Councilmember Breckus, had a different word for it. She called it I'm not sure, but she had a term for it. Do you recall what that was, Councilman Breckus?
The urban interface or the expanding regional footprint?
I don't know, but you had even a better term, but we'll go back and we'll find that term. But anyway, it wasn't the sphere, it was a different term. And I just want to make sure that we think about our resources, not just narrowly inside our park boundaries, but at the limits where a lot of the newer residents are growing and providing, whether it's North Valleys again, out in Verdi, wherever, that we focus there. I have one more point, but I think my time's probably over. So.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Councilwoman Jordan.
I'm good. Just kudos for making it through a tough year with all the shutdowns and the park equipment, restrictions. And I know everybody was so frustrated and did want to get out. You guys navigated all of that and the reopenings and have been great at keeping everybody safe. And just appreciate you and all that you and everybody in your department do. And looking forward to what's next for our great parks and rec and parks department.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. We'll go back to you, Councilwoman Jordan, and Councilwoman Breckus right after that, and then we'll all be done. So go ahead, Councilwoman Jordan. I'm not Sid, I'm sorry. Dewar, Councilwoman Dewar. Yes.
Okay, the last point I want to make is I'm looking at this funding as a three-legged stool at a minimum. So we have some general fund. We may have the ballot initiative, which brings in, would enable us to do matching on grants. So whether they're a federal grant, which there are many grants available, whether it's state grants, they made a state grant program available 2 years ago. We have not been able to access that or apply for that to my knowledge. There are other grants available as well. But if we have a funding source, we can match those. But the third leg of the stool is this RCT, right? Residential construction tax, $1,000 a door. We have found that woefully insufficient. Case example, Caramella Ranch in my ward. Not only were we not able to buy the land, 5 acres for 900 new homes, which is over, and at least 1,500 to 2,000 people, 2,500 people. 5 acres is all they get, but we couldn't even pay for that. The cost of it was 1.6 million. The residential construction tax raised only 900,000. We were very lucky to have a developer who said, I will give you the land for 900,000 and, consider the rest a contribution. But now we have a 5-acre park with nothing on it. Not the first bench, not the first parking spot, not the first trailhead. And so what I'd like to do is know, is there any consideration to looking at that $1,000? Maybe that's a 2 years from now legislative request, but I really do think we have to increase the RCT. It's obviously not cutting it. What do you think about that?
I know that it would definitely take a legislative action to be able to do that, since it's under NRS and it's statewide. But other states certainly have higher dollar amounts per door, and any increase would be a fantastic increase, given that I think it's been $1,000 a door since its inception, which was, I think, the late 80s. And so obviously that has not kept up with inflation.
So anyway, something to think about for the future, Mr. Manager. Maybe working with maybe it's a, one of these NACO type of bills or something, because it would benefit everyone, all local governments, county and city in the state. And it's so critical, and it would help us, balance these stools, multiple funding sources coming together. So I'll just leave it at that and just say, again, Jamie, you do a fantastic job. We're so lucky to have you. I love working with you. Just your smiling face, your attitude about your job. I think it transmits to everyone, in your whole department. And I like that the trees are over with you, because again, I think you inspire them. You show up at all the events. It makes them feel supported and welcome. And I'm going to put in a final pitch for, whatever happens with the trees, we need to fund it somewhere. So, and since we're on parks, I'll leave it there, and thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Dewar. Councilwoman Breckus?
Yeah, if we're thinking revenue and out of the box, to me, it is and always has been that the city of Reno is just shut out in a great way on the lodger's tax that is generated within our boundaries. That's the go-to, not billboards or tourism offices in Shanghai. And that's the play, in my view. Secondly, Ms. Schroeder talks about all the street trees we're maintaining. This RTC needs to get in the maintenance business of streets and not load it onto the jurisdictions. And that is a way to help rescue our budget for these essential services. And we just, every year we put it as a priority, but we never make plays for it that way. So that's the disappointment to me. I guess I'll leave the rest of my comments for when we get to the Moana pool, but it's just too early to know what you're looking for CARES Act money for any big sort of act for that, or I guess, Mr. Manager.
Do you mean for the ARPA funds, the newly
Yeah,
announced
the
program?
ARPA, I'll call it ARPA. Yeah, sorry about that.
It's a little early in that the federal government has about 40 days left to actually deposit the money, and we have yet to receive any further guidance on Treasury or from Treasury. And so there's a phrase in the law, I don't have it written in front of me, but it is roughly necessary infrastructure projects. And so what we're looking for a little bit is what is a necessary infrastructure project so that we can better help you make informed decisions on how to spend that money.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. Councilwoman Jordan, did you have any last follow-up? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we're finished with this. And Jamie, I guess I should say Miss Schroeder. Thank you so much. Just appreciate your smile and all that you all do.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments, but really, truly, I'm just the face of an incredible team that is really dedicated. So all the kudos and credit really go to them.
And it's a great face for that. So yeah. Thanks so much. Mr. Manager, where do you want to go now? We're at 440.
We're at 452. I think actually we've covered the ground that we intended to cover today. We only have a handful of bigger departments tomorrow, and we can run through some of the smaller ones. I think that we've made enough headway for the day. Unless there's anything further from the group, I think we can call it a shift.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask again, I know that Ms. Luckner sent over which departments in what order. I don't think we all had that. So for tomorrow, could we all receive something? I think I just received it, Ms. Breckus. I would like to see if tomorrow morning when we start, we can have which ones we're starting with and we can all know where we're going.
We will have it out to you in just a few moments.
Okay, thank you so much. And is there a motion to adjourn?
No.
No.
Madam Vice Mayor?
Oh,
No.
sorry. Madam Clerk, I'll go to you.
Thank you. I wouldn't let you adjourn, don't worry. Madam Vice Mayor, just to note for the record, we are on item C1, which is general closing public comment. This item is reserved for public comments that were received after 4 p.m. the day preceding the meeting, which would have been yesterday. We received 72 letters in support of the Moana Springs Aquatic Project, 1 letter in support of Reno Sustainability and Climate Action. Again, these are placed in general as they came in after 4 p.m., but they do relate to your budget. Those have been submitted to council and are part of the official record. We have no voicemails, and now you may look for your motion to adjourn.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion by Councilwoman Jordan, seconded by Councilwoman Breckus. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you all. Awesome.
Go Zags.
Good job, madam.